Standing by.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Complete.
Tajigen, Ohayo gozaimasu, is your favorite superstar maniac, the multi-dimensional Tajigen Khaiden, a sentient star cluster, and many cosmic minds combined in VTuber, V-Singer form. I am once again so sorry Tajigen we did not have Legend CA Mega Dimension yesterday. Things got messy AF for me at that point in the day. So, I'm sorry about that. You know, week was already with like only 3 streams. Very chill in that way, but also it was promising like to be the longest stream of the week. Even if I left it at like a shorter length of sorts compared to what we were planning to do, it was gonna end up being a longer affair than what we're doing today and what we did on Friday. It was a casual session in Eureka and all that on Friday, right? What we're doing today, though, is not casual at all. I can tell you that. And also, yeah, I'm almost certain there will be at least 2 more Mega Dimension streams. By the time we do the next one, depending on the timeline or so, I think Pokemon Champions will be released. We might be checking it out on the same week in which we're doing that. Either way it works out, it's okay. Legend CA Mega Dimension, a little bit more of that in April, but we should be finishing it in April. Which means after that, we have some unfinished business in Pokemon Violet. And after that, well, I think we're gonna go for something completely different. No Pokemon next, though. Maybe still an option, but I already have something in mind, though it's on my PC. It's not something that on paper should be very bulky on the PC, but I'm gonna have to double check because the potatoification of my PC continues and thus, you know, weird things happen. Yeah, speaking of scuff and weird things happening, my mic, I think it's not doing it right now, but hold on, let me It's not doing it right now, but it was doing a static noise. That's a problem that happens here and there. The biggest solution I think I found for that, I think, is to get a ferrite bead and to like wrap it around the cable somewhere. It's not a cable that naturally comes with one. Or maybe I buy myself a cable that, I forget what it is that it uses. It uses USB and the other end is USB-C, I think. So one that already has it built in might also work. Needs to be a cable long enough for the microphone. So that's important too. But yeah, it's not doing it right now, but like literally about a minute or 2 minutes before I started the stream, I started doing it. Like I am gonna do a sound test of some sort to an extent that there's some sound settings I definitely check before the stream. Some streamers are more dedicated about that. They have like a whole 30-minute period where they test the mic or something. I don't. But like there are some tests I do, or at the very least there's a setting I always check, which is the volume on Windows itself. Is the gain itself. Sometimes it hasn't done that in a while. I think it only happens really after an update or so, but sometimes it forgets where I put it, which is below 100, and it just puts it at 100 and it's like gonna pick up too much. You're gonna hear the ant that's walking on the wall or something behind me, and like no, I don't want it to do that. But yeah, I feel terrible about yesterday not happening, but yeah, apart from that, the things that were coming up ate up the stream time pretty much, so like, it was the right decision. It was the right decision to have to call it off. But afterwards, I did some good things with the day. I did good things with that, at least. So it's alright. Yeah, like, the stream time it ate up, it was like, around what would have been the 3-hour or 4-hour mark of the stream, is when I finally, like, would have been able to start the stream. Like, you know, 3 hours or 4 hours into the... So yeah, it wasn't like a good idea to do it. I did watch Gavan Infinity and Sets, Kamen Rider Sets, yesterday. And the episodes were so freaking good. That was later in the day now, much later. But yeah, that was the day though. Apart from the little postponement, cancellation, it was an okay day, actually. Not too shabby. Some things that I needed doing, I was able to do, and thank goodness for that. Let me recenter myself here. KukichuTSF. Before we get into the reading. Before we get into the reading, we're gonna summarize a few things. That's what we're gonna do. Should we remain on the screen, or should we go for... I'm not sure. Let's summarize already. There's probably other things I want to talk about regarding the rest of the week and what I was up to, all of that. Let's leave that for afterwards. I am gonna start using the ambient noise already. So yeah. Hopefully, if the mic static noise issue happens again, you don't hear it too much. And it doesn't affect the reading, the quality of it, all of that. We need to summarize Last and First Man, all of it, before chapter 15. I don't actually have notes this time, but mostly I will be talking about it, not based on chapters this time, but based on the humanities, the man. Right. Balkan Europe. The Anglo-French War. The Russo-German War, I think. All of those wars. Basically, World War II doesn't happen, or maybe it happens in a sort of different way, or... Who knows? I keep thinking something early on could have been interpreted as saying that World War II did happen. It's not like it's not important, but it's kind of glossed over, or rather it's implied that it's there somewhere, which is at all not the case because this was published in 1930. Anything from World War II we will not see until Star Maker to an extent, and that's only in the epilogue where the human author of the book, hopefully this is not a spoiler, is back on Earth after the big journey they took, supreme moment of the cosmos and all that, and it's 1937 when it got published, so it's like Stapledon and all of Europe, maybe all of the world, saw the writing on the wall, and they were like, oh, something's brewing over there, something's brewing over in Russia and in Germany, things like that. But that's really just a glimpse of it. We see way more of it in his novel Death into Life, which I think came out 46 or 47. So yeah, like there's a very explicit mention. No, like it starts with somebody that fought in World War II dying, as the book name implies. Yeah, gunner, a rear gunner on a plane, something like that. I forget the title. Yeah, it starts literally like that. You can even see it in the summary on Wikipedia. It starts with them. I was actually reading it. I wanted to say last year, but it's already been more than that. Late 2024 maybe. And rereading, I should say, because I have already read all of it before, but it's been many years now, and I was rereading it again. But now, well, I guess I have to restart yet again. Maybe I'll see. Last Man in London, I still haven't finished. Haven't been able to pick it up again, and I'm close to the end. I'm like 90% through according to my Kindle. Yeah. See, caliber, which is what we use for the reader, you for like the text you see on the screen, the way we show the text here, does show you a percentage, but it will be different than how it is on the Kindle because font size will be different, all that. Or maybe the percentage is the same. The page number is what's different because of font size and all that. But anyway, summarizing Last and First Man, yeah, all those wars and all that happen. Humanity. They eventually do achieve the first world state after a very particular moment on an island in the Pacific with a woman, the daughter of man, all of that. The world state does happen. Yay, peace, utopia, except it's all degenerate and decadent. At its core, it's just messed up. There was some form of racism still happening, and not quite right. Things weren't quite right, but also peaceful enough, perhaps. A brave new world of sorts like Aldous Huxley, but maybe slightly better than that one. But still, you know, eventually it all collapses because they lost some knowledge of sciences. Didn't quite do them right. A plague that was used, the American plague, in like those last wars, American-Chinese war. I guess unleashed without them understanding what the hell they're doing. Cannibalism, riots, destruction, is an apocalypse, societal collapse basically. For many years humanity spends it in a sort of Stone Age, sort of farming Stone Age, a bit of feudalism here and there maybe, I'm not sure. I don't remember it by now. Eventually they are able to rise up again, humanity again, as Homo sapiens, as the first man, starting from Patagonia, civilization like that. People age faster now, however. The cult of youth, the prophet, the Jesus figure this time is considered the child of man. Yeah, I don't remember how God was. God is either the perfect child of humanity, or humanity is the perfect child of God, or well, not so perfect maybe, but still, something like that. Eventually, however, eventually they have a sort of totalitarian world state this time, which is not as nice as the first world state, I think, but also people feel fine enough with it because of the paternal, maternal, the parental sort of situation going on. People are fine being treated as children or being parents, or kind of both ways. But eventually there's a riot. Conditions really are not that good, actually. There's a riot in a mine, and in that riot of the mine, things go so wrong. So terribly wrong. With the technology they didn't quite understand they were using, massive destruction happens across the entire planet. More destructive than anything hitherto seen. And only about, 36 people survived that they were on an expedition somewhere. Eventually, I need to start like wrapping this up, because for the first man, because yeah, we're gonna take too long with the summary. Eventually, from those survivors, they make it, but they rarely make it, but they make it. And really, that was an apocalyptic event now even more apocalyptic than last time. The first man, the first humanity as it is today, is able to survive for millions of years, but only barely making it as like barbaric, primitive people. Not exactly Neanderthal level, but I would say something more like early Stone Age again. Things of the sort, probably, you know? They barely are able to scrape by an existence. They are in, where were it, in Siberia? Or, yeah, somewhere in Siberia. From their continents change and all that, this takes place across millions of years. They still kind of make it somehow. As they do that, they become the second man. Evolution does happen across this period of time, and the second man happened. Another group that went to Labrador Island, whatever the place name is, or whatever it is. Over millions of years, there's survivors that barely are making it. De-evolve into the subman, the baboon-like submen, which are eventually subjugated by some other monkeys. They come into conflict with the second man. Eventually, the second man almost get killed. All of that humanity by the conflict. Eventually, the baboon-like subman and the monkeys all kind of go extinct, kind of killing each other or something. They kill the monkeys that were like subjugating them, and then the baboon-like subman eventually just collapse. Things like that. The second men are much more evolved, much better than the first man in terms of like empathy, in terms of being able to see new colors, in terms of like having better things with their mind, their biology allowing them to do better things too. Things like that. They are much bigger. They are bigger. They are like, I don't know, in meters, 3 meters long, or I don't know if they said it. Because then the fifth men are gonna be even bigger. They're gonna be truly giants, I think. Kaiju size, you might even say. I always get picturing them kaiju size, you know, a sort of Godzilla size, or maybe Godzilla size, at least maybe the Godzilla from the 60s, who nowadays would be dwarfed by other buildings. That's always the funny thing. The second men have the rises and falls of civilizations. They're more advanced, they're better. There's a more natural cosmopolitanism and empathy with them. It's more a fundamental thing. This is a common thing that we see, that arts, empathy for the spirit of man and things like that, empathy for other people and all that, is something that should be coming with evolution at some point or another. If the people don't go extinct, or the species don't go extinct or something, eventually evolution will have that be part of someone. It's just at that point, all of that becomes essential to survival in a way. Not as essential as being a brute that survives in the jungle, maybe, but still. The second men eventually do develop a nice utopic world society, much better than the world states we saw before from the first man, as they're about to maybe start genetically modifying themselves or creating a new version of themselves to succeed them that's even better than them. Martians invade. Big cloud-like things that can become kind of like jelly. They're an intelligence that can have their bodies. They can become a multi-minded being, as we have seen, a very common theme, and we're gonna see more of that very soon. The biggest potential of that we're gonna see in the coming chapters, but not exactly in the right way. Not exactly in the way we're gonna see, or in the way it was starting to become with the fifth man. It's a lesser version of that. The Martians expand in a way when they have the whole racial mind of the whole planet, or the colonists later, and then the planet separately. It's something that just expands its body mass with more bodies. It doesn't become a greater mind, exactly. Not quite. Regardless though, they go on and invade Earth. and it's a lot of misunderstanding. The Martians barely are able to understand by the end of it that humanity is sentient, what the actual sentience of the planet is. Humanity understands that better, the second man. Too much destruction happens though. Over 300,000 years the war continues. It's kind of a cold war at times, kind of an attrition situation at times, but eventually, well, a big plague happens with the second man. Things have gotten so bad with them that they're okay dying with the Martians. The second man, however, survived. The Martians do not, but the second man, however, do survive somehow. They are very crippled mentally and physically though. They go on for millions of years existing, but not developing a society again, not really, not improving themselves biologically, artificially again. So eventually evolution does its thing again, and the third man emerge. They have a bit of the Martian units in them, in their biology and all that. Some other life forms on Earth have that. They have a cat-like muscle. I keep picturing them as cat-like, kind of like cat boys, cat girls, but that's probably not it. It's more than that. They have 6 fingers. I don't remember how many fingers the second man had. But yeah, they have even more rises and falls than other like men before them, the previous ones. And they have a sort of like racial epoch-like ADHD basically, because their societies are based around something like one based on music. Then they have one based on genetics and all that, like different things that just gets their attention at times. And eventually the one for genetics develops the fourth man, the giant brains, which I keep picturing giant brains just floating in the air, which I think is not quite how it happens, because they're like inside this jar. Some artist interpretations have shown that. And they have some sort of appendages like by the giant jar or whatever it was. I need to see the description again. I'll experience this book again maybe in 4 years for its 100th anniversary. I should do that. But yeah. They are able to manipulate the environment around them and all that. Eventually the third man, well, they are subjugating them in a way that's not good for them. They eventually wipe them out, except they keep quite a few of them alive for experiments that they continue running for. I don't know how long the fourth man's stay on Earth is, but it's about 1 million years maybe? I don't know. I don't know if it reached like 1 million. They are immortal. They are immortal essentially. They're not gonna die of old age or anything. The giant brains, the fourth man. They are the stereotypical all intelligence, no emotions thing. Because of that, they eventually realize after many experiments of all sorts on the third man they have subjugated, the ones they kept for experiments. And I say the ones they kept, but it's, you know, not the same ones as when the war with the third man ended. No, these are like their descendants, basically. I think that's the implication. This takes place across hundreds of thousands of years, maybe 1 million. They eventually develop the fifth man after much experimentation. The fifth man are amazing. Amazing. In so many ways. They eventually take down the fourth man who do not understand them, and they're like, a war wages out. And yeah, the fourth man all die off. The fifth men are gigantic. They have a very big brain, but they're not giant brains, you know? Among other things. They barely have hair, I think. Just a ruddy cap, I forgot what it was. They have their rises and falls, their primitive eras, all of that. But eventually they develop a society hitherto unknown, where things are just heavenly. At the push of a button, so many things that one would not take for granted are taken for granted, basically. Without them actually taking it for granted. And many things incomprehensible to the first man, the Homo sapiens, that cannot be explained. They develop a true world utopia. They are not immortal, however, and it's very important that they're not immortal. We saw this last time, actually. We started with the fifth man, and it came from there. So yeah, I think the summary now is gonna go for what we covered last week, which was a long thing. Yeah. They are able to eventually travel into the past. After some experiments that go wrong, they are able to kind of master it. They uncover everything about past versions of humanity and all that. They want to continue doing that, but eventually it is found that the moon is on a weird and very bad collision course with Earth. Because of that, they are forced to seek shelter elsewhere in the solar system. They eventually find Venus. After trying some things with electrolysis stations, they find there are actually sentient, intelligent life forms living there, the Venerians. Fish-like individuals that are on the waters of Venus. They have no choice but to eventually eradicate them. They have to go through all kinds of mental gymnastics, they kind of end up with some reasonable arguments and all that, but it was like, no other choice. No other choice. By the end of it, they eventually settled there. Life is not good for the fifth man, however. Eventually, they are forced to just live a very bad life. Millions of years happen, evolution happens, the sixth man happen. Much more dwarfed in size. Much smaller than the fifth man, and I think even the first man. The sixth men are like humanity right now. They develop their theocracies, their medieval kingdoms, their societies, their industrial age, their wars, their world wars, all the many mistakes, their world states. I think there's more rises and falls maybe, but yeah, they make all the mistakes the first man did. Eventually evolution does this thing like it did from the first to second man, I think, and the seventh man emerged. They're very small sized and they're avian, very avian. Or no, wait, I think the sixth man actually genetically create the seventh man. No, they actually do, my bad. They are in one of the world states that happens. Who knows what happens to the sixth man afterwards, but one of the things that happened to the previous humanities happens in some way. Seventh men do not develop their society that much. They eventually end up in very primitive states, but to them that doesn't matter. Because of how they, in the air, when they fly, they are like a heightened mind that has peace and joy about everything. Even death, even tragedy, all of that. Amazing things. But when on the ground, not flying, they may give in to despair or sadness, and things are like, ugh, not nice. Eventually, from a flawed version of their species, from flawed individuals in the species that are born without the wings, or the wings are not working, with the wings which are like part of their bodies, like a membrane, or like, I forget what it was described like, but, you know, between their arm and their torso, the wing emerges there. It's not a wing with feathers, I think. I don't think it is. But, or maybe there were feathers. I think there were to an extent. But anyway, those people eventually happen so often that they're given a place in society also, so things on the ground can run somewhere. Somebody has to do it. They eventually rise up in rebellion, so to speak, and in a sort of contemptuous spirit for the seventh men who are always enjoying things that they can never enjoy. And this happens over the course of several generations and epochs and thousands of years maybe. So it's not like it's the same once and 10 years later the rebellion no, not quite like that. Rebellion is not even the word. Eventually they pretty much subjugate the seventh man. The seventh men that can actually fly and all that. Who all eventually just end their own lives. Boom, the seventh men are gone. Technically the seventh men are still around, but it's all the flightless versions of them. Eventually these either genetically modify themselves or evolve, or a combination of both, into the eighth man, who become very industrialistic. They are not that advanced in terms of the mind compared to the first man or so. They maybe are more advanced, but I mean in terms of what the fifth man and the second man were like. Being able to reach a great enlightenment of the spirit and mentality and all that. They don't necessarily have that, but they're very good at technology. They industrialize the hell out of Venus. Amazing things they do. Eventually, there's a dark stranger coming from space, a dark thing that's affecting the sun, and it's gonna make it just go boom. Not exactly supernova, or maybe it's an early supernova. Humanity is once again forced to find shelter elsewhere in the solar system. After trying maybe Mercury or I don't remember where, it's found out that it has to be Neptune. They have to go way, way out. Either ships, I think that was kind of revolutionized by the fifth man, eventually rediscovered again, all of that. Either because of the way they kind of like use fuel for it, the way it travels. It's like, that's why they're called ether ships. Basically in a way that like it's a self-sustained fuel. It's like, it's actually amazing. I forget what it was like though. I forget what the process was like exactly, but yeah. They eventually send the ninth man, which they themselves created and developed, because the eighth man would not be able to live on Neptune. They barely were able to go into its atmosphere and such. They terraformed Neptune to an extent. It's all, you know, within one of the poles, I think the North Pole of Neptune. Barely making it, but they sent the ninth man. The eighth man all died with Venus. The ninth man, which I think originally, you know, they do know they came from Venus originally, the ones that were sent to colonize the planet and all that. They go in there, but even with all the projections the eighth man tried to do, things are not good for them. Conditions are not good for them. They're barely able to make a meager existence. Eventually, now all the buildings collapse, all the things collapse for them. Things go bad for them. As years go by, all but primitive things, barely making it into a stone age, if anything. They all eventually go out. They devolve and evolve into all sorts of things. All sorts of... Nowhere did the original human form survive, is the quote that gets used a lot. Oh, my microphone is doing the thing, by the way. My microphone is doing the static noise. Hopefully you don't hear it too much as we do the reading. But okay. And it could be louder right now. It's not that loud right now. Hopefully it remains that way. We shall see. But there are many de-evolutions. They are barely, you know, mentioned in a lot of the passages. There's maybe one sentence for each and every one of them. The 10th men, which are like small rabbit-like things. Rabbit-like doesn't mean they're much like rabbits, though. Everything here resembles humans in some way, all warped in all sorts of ways. There's some insects that made it through, but they didn't like transfer any fauna from Venus, nothing like that, I think. So, and I think Venus did have fauna from Earth, for example. Flora did go in there, and insects came with them without them realizing it. But yeah, it's all that. It's all like from the human form, basically, that it comes. And the 10th men are that. The 11th men are like this thing with tusks. They get hunted to extinction by, I think, maybe the 12th men, who are like kangaroo-like things, or some other like sub-man or somewhere there. But the 12th men are like kangaroo-like things, I think. They are the ones that are killed by the 13th men, which are very just savage things. You may picture them as like just, you know, chimpanzees or how big monkey, return to monkey thing. But they may not necessarily be that. Eventually the 13th men just die from a plague or something, which is what happened to the 10th man as well. Okay, the sound is gonna wait. I get the feeling it's gonna go in and out as it goes on. Hopefully you don't even hear it at all. But anyway. Eventually the 14th men emerge. The 14th men are much like the first men here on Earth, the 6th men on Venus, in what happens with their societies. Even for them, it's even more periods of rises and falls. It's millions of years of going over and over through world state after world state after world state, or societies after societies. It's a lot of them. A lot of them. But you know, they are able to conceive the religion of love, religions, all of this, medieval kingdoms, queendoms, theocracies, things like that, industrial eras, world age, wars, countries, nations, nationalism, things like that. That's the implication anyway. Eventually, however, what happened from the first to the second man, what happened from the 6th to the 7th man, maybe to an extent, more like from the first to the second is the better comparison. That happens, and the 15th man emerge, and this time there are no Martians stopping it. The 15th man eventually create the 16th man, and I think the 16th men are the first ones to have eyes on the back of their heads, so that it's now a complete circular view of their environment that they have. The 16th men eventually want to like expand the human mind and the human spirit and the capacity of humanity even further. They create the 17th man, succeeding them. I always like to think that when they're doing these like artificial creations of their own, they're using their own DNA in some way. So it is like their children in a way. There is descendants. Somebody of the 18th man, 1 billion years into the future, 2 billion years into the future, can trace their descendancy. Descendancy, is that the word? Their ancestry, that's the word. Can trace their ancestry to somebody, you know, like through their DNA biologically can actually trace their ancestry to somebody in early European humans or something, or in early humans overall, right? Homo erectus, Homo habilis or something. Something like that. But yeah, what was I saying? The 17th men also are really enlightened, really amazing. They, however, have some flaw that, you know, cannot be described to readers of this book. And eventually, yeah. I'm actually gonna read what it said. Consequently, of the 100 million years which passed before the 16th man produced the new human type, I must not pause to tell. They thought they had achieved their heart's desire, but in fact the glorious means which they had produced were tortured by subtle imperfections beyond their maker's comprehension. Consequently, no sooner had these 17th men peopled the world and attained full cultural stature, than they also bent all their strength to the production of a new type, essentially like their own, but perfected. Thus, after a brief career of a few 100,000 years, crowded with splendor and agony, the 17th gave place to the 18th, and as it turns out, the last human species. Since all the earlier cultures find their fulfillment in the world of the last man, I pass over them to enlarge somewhat upon our modern age. Alright, that was my not-so-brief summary of it all. I think I took like 20 minutes summarizing the whole damn thing. Something like that. Let us go to the reading screen now, shall we? That pretty much summarizes what we need to summarize with it. So, before we go on with this, give me a second. Very well. We now continue and aim to finish it. Last and First Man. Chapter 15. 1. Introduction to the last human species. If one of the first men could enter the world of the last man, he would find many things familiar, and much that would seem strangely distorted and perverse. But nearly everything that is most distinctive of the last human species would escape him, unless he were to be told that behind all the obvious and imposing features of civilization, behind all the social organization and personal intercourse of a great community, lay a whole other world of spiritual culture round about him, yet beyond his ken. He would no more suspect its existence than a cat in London suspects the existence of finance or literature. Among the familiar things that he would encounter would be creatures recognizably human, yet in his view grotesque. While he himself labored under the weight of his own body, these giants would be easily striding. He would consider them very sturdy, often thick-set folk, but he would be compelled to allow them grace of movement and even beauty of proportion. The longer he stayed with them, the more beauty he would see in them, and the less complacently would he regard his own type. Some of these fantastic men and women he would find covered with fur, hirsute, or mole velvet, revealing the underlying muscles. Others would display brown, yellow, or ruddy skin, and yet others a translucent ash green, warmed by the underflowing blood. As a species, though we are all human, we are extremely variable in body and mind, so variable that superficially we seem to be not one species, but many. Some characters, of course, are common to all of us. The traveler might perhaps be surprised by the large, yet sensitive hands which are universal, both in men and women. In all of us, the outermost finger bears at its tip 3 minute organs of manipulation, rather similar to those which were first devised for the fifth man. These excrescences would doubtless revolt our visitor. The pair of occipital eyes, too, would shock him, so would the upward-looking astronomical eye on the crown, which is peculiar to the last man. This organ was so cunningly designed that, when fully extended, about a handbreadth from its bony case, it reveals the heavens in as much detail as your smaller astronomical telescopes. Apart from such special features as these, there is nothing definitely novel about us, though every limb, every contour shows unmistakably that much has happened since the days of the first man. We are both more human and more animal. The primitive explorer might be more readily impressed by our animality than our humanity. So much of our humanity would lie beyond his grasp. He would perhaps at first regard us as a degraded type. He would call us fawn-like, and in particular cases, ape-like, bear-like, ox-like, marsupial, or elephantine. Yet our general proportions are definitely human in the ancient manner. Where gravity is not insurmountable, the erect biped form is bound to be most serviceable to intelligent land animals, and so after long wanderings, man has returned to his old shape. Moreover, if our observer were himself at all sensitive to facial expression, he would come to recognize in every one of our innumerable physiognomic types an indescribable but distinctively human look, the visible sign of that inward and spiritual grace which is not wholly absent from his own species. He would perhaps say, "These men that are beasts are surely gods also." He would be reminded of those old Egyptian deities with animal heads. But in us, the animal and the human interpenetrate in every feature, in every curve of the body, and with infinite variety. He would observe us, together with hints of the long-extinct Mongol, Negro, Nordic, and Semitic, many outlandish features and expressions, deriving from the subhuman period on Neptune or from Venus. He would see in every limb unfamiliar contours of muscle, sinew, or bone, which were acquired long after the first man had vanished. Besides the familiar eye colors, he would discover orbs of topaz, emerald, amethyst, and ruby, and 1,000 varieties of these. But in all of us, he would see also, if he had discernment, a facial expression and bodily gesture peculiar to our own species, a certain luminous yet pungent and ironical significance, which we miss almost wholly in the earlier human faces. The traveler would recognize among us unmistakable sexual features, both of general proportions and special organs. But it would take him long to discover that some of the most striking bodily and facial differences were due to differentiation of the two ancient sexes into many subsexes. Full sexual experience involves for us a complicated relationship between individuals of all these types. Of the extremely important sexual groups, I shall speak again. Our visitor would notice, by the way, that though all persons on Neptune go habitually nude, save for a pouch or rucksack, clothing, often brightly colored, and made of diverse or lustrous or homely tissues unknown before our time, is worn for special purposes. He would notice also, scattered about the green countryside, many buildings, mostly of one story, for there's plenty of room on Neptune even for the million of the last man. Here and there, however, we have great architectural pylons, cruciform or star-shaped in section, cloud-piercing, dignifying the invariable plains of Neptune. These mightiest of all buildings, which are constructed in adamantine materials formed of artificial atoms, would seem to our visitor geometrical mountains, far taller than any natural mountain could be, even on the smallest planet. In many cases, the whole fabric is translucent or transparent, so that at night, with internal illumination, it appears as an edifice of light. Springing from a base 20 or more miles across, the star-seeking towers attain a height where even Neptune's atmosphere is somewhat attenuated. In their summits work the hosts of our astronomers, the essential eyes through which our community, on her little raft, pierce across the ocean. Thither also all men and women repair at one time or another to contemplate this galaxy of ours and the unnumbered remoter universes. There they perform together those supreme symbolic acts, for which I find no adjective in your speech but the debased word religious. There also they seek the refreshment of mountain air, in a world where natural mountains are unknown. And on the pinnacles and precipices of these loftiest horns, many of us gratify that primeval lust of climbing, which was ingrained in man before ever he was man. These buildings thus combine the functions of observatory, temple, sanatorium, and gymnasium. Some of them are almost as old as the species, some are not yet completed. They embody therefore many styles. The traveler would find modes which he would be tempted to call Gothic, Classical, Egyptian, Peruvian, Chinese, or American, besides 1,000 architectural ideas unfamiliar to him. Each of these buildings was the work of the race as a whole at some stage in its career. None of them is a mere local product. Every successive culture has expressed itself in one or more of these supreme monuments. Once in 40,000 years or so, some new architectural glory would be conceived and executed. And such is the continuity of our cultures that there has scarcely ever been need to remove the handiwork of the past. If our visitor happened to be near enough to one of these great pylons, he would see it surrounded by a swarm of midges, which would turn out to be human flyers, wingless, but with outspread arms. The stranger might wonder how a large organism could rise from the ground in Neptune's powerful field of gravity. Yet flight is our ordinary means of locomotion, and man has but to put on a suit of overalls fitted at various points with radiation generators. Ordinary flight thus becomes a kind of aerial swimming. Only when very high speed is desired do we make use of closed-in airboats and liners. At the feet of the great buildings, the flat or undulating country is green, brown, golden, and strewn with houses. Our traveler would recognize that much land was under cultivation, and would see many persons at work upon it with tools or machinery. Most of our food, indeed, is produced by artificial photosynthesis on the broiling planet Jupiter, where even now that the sun is becoming normal again, no life can exist without powerful refrigeration. As far as mere nutrition is concerned, we could do without vegetation, but agriculture and its products have played so great a part in human history that today agricultural operations and vegetable foods are very beneficial to the race psychologically. And so it comes about that vegetable matter is in great demand, not only as raw material for innumerable manufacturers, but also for table delicacies. Green vegetables, fruit, and various alcoholic fruit drinks have come to have the same kind of ritual significance for us as wine has for you. Meat also, though not a part of ordinary diet, is eaten on very rare and sacred occasions. The cherished wild fauna of the planet contributes its toll to periodic symbolical banquets, and whenever a human being has chosen to die, his body is ceremoniously eaten by his friends. Communication with the food factories of Jupiter and the agricultural polar regions of the less torrid Uranus, as also with the automatic mining stations on the glacial outer planets, is maintained by ether ships, which, traveling much faster than the planets themselves, make the passage to the neighbor worlds in a small fraction of the Neptunian year. These vessels, of which the smallest are about a mile in length, may be seen descending on our oceans like ducks. Before they touch the water, they cause a prodigious tumult with the downward pressure of their radiation, but once upon the surface, they pass quietly into harbor. The ether ship is in a manner symbolic of our whole community, so highly organized is it, and so minute in relation to the void which engulfs it. The ethereal navigators, because they spend so much of their time in the empty regions, beyond the range of telepathic communication and sometimes even of mechanical radio, form mentally a unique class among us. They are a hardy, simple, and modest folk, and though they embody man's proud mastery of the ether, they are never tired of reminding landlubbers, with dour jocularity, that the most daring voyages are confined within one drop of the boundless ocean of space. Recently, an exploration ship returned from a voyage into the outer tracks. Half her crew had died. The survivors were emaciated, diseased, and mentally unbalanced. To a race that thought itself so well established in sanity that nothing could disturb it, the spectacle of these unfortunates was instructive. Throughout the voyage, which was the longest ever attempted, they had encountered nothing whatever but 2 comets and an occasional meteor. Some of the nearer constellations were seen with altered forms. 1 or 2 stars increased slightly in brightness, and the sun was reduced to being the most brilliant of stars. The aloof and changeless presence of the constellations seems to have crazed the voyagers. When at last the ship returned and berthed, there was a scene such as is seldom witnessed in our modern world. The crew flung open the ports and staggered blubbering into the arms of the crowd. It would never have been believed that members of our species could be so far reduced from the self-possession that is normal to us. Subsequently, these poor human wrecks have shown an irrational phobia of the stars and of all that is not human. They dare not go out at night. They live in an extravagant passion for the presence of others, and since all others are astronomically minded, they cannot find real companionship. They insanely refuse to participate in the mental life of the race upon the plane where all things are seen in their just proportions. They cling piteously to the sweets of individual life, and so they are led to curse the immensities. They fill their minds with human conceits and their houses with toys. By night they draw the curtains and drown the quiet voice of the stars in revelry. But it is a joyless and a haunted revelry, desire less for itself than as a defense against reality. 2. Childhood and maturity. I said that we were all astronomically minded, but we are not without human interests. Our visitor from the Earth would soon discover that the low buildings, sprinkled on all sides, were the homes of individuals, families, sexual groups, and bands of companions. Most of these buildings are so constructed that the roof and walls can be removed, completely or partially, for sunbathing and for the night. Round each house is a wilderness, or a garden, or an orchard of our sturdy fruit trees. Here and there, men and women may be seen at work with hoe or spade or secateurs. The buildings themselves affect many styles, and within doors, our visitor would find great variety from house to house. Even within a single house, he might come on rooms seemingly of different epochs. And while some rooms are crowded with articles, many of which would be incomprehensible to the stranger, others are bare, save for a table, chairs, a cupboard, and perhaps some single object of pure art. We have an immense variety of manufactured goods, but the visitor from a world obsessed with material wealth would probably remark the simplicity, even austerity, which characterizes most private houses. He would doubtless be surprised to see no books. In every room, however, there is a cupboard filled with minute rolls of tape, microscopically figured. Each of these rolls contains matter which could not be crammed into a score of your volumes. They are used in connection with a pocket instrument, the size and shape of the ancient cigarette case. When the roll is inserted, it reels itself off at any desired speed, and interferes systematically with ethereal vibrations produced by the instrument. Thus is generated a very complex flow of telepathic language which permeates the brain of the reader. So delicate and direct is this medium of expression that there is scarcely any possibility of misunderstanding the author's intention. The rolls themselves, it should be said, are produced by another special instrument, which is sensitive to vibrations generated in the author's brain. Not that it produces a mere replica of his stream of consciousness. It records only those images and ideas with which he deliberately inscribes it. I may mention also that, since we can at any moment communicate by direct telepathy with any person on the planet, these books of ours are not used for the publication of merely ephemeral thought. Each one of them preserves only the thresh shed and chosen grains of some mind's harvest. Other instruments may be observed in our houses, which I cannot pause to describe. Instruments whose office is either to carry out domestic drudgery or to minister directly in one way or another to culture life. Near the outer door would be hanging a number of flying suits, and in a garage attached to the house would be the private airboats, gaily colored torpedo-shaped objects of various sizes. Decoration in our houses, save in those which belong to children, is everywhere simple, even severe. Nonetheless, we prize it greatly and spend much consideration upon it. Children, indeed, often adorn their houses with splendor, which adults themselves can also enjoy through children's eyes, even as they can enter into the frolics of infants with unaffected glee. The number of children in our world is small in relation to our immense population. Yet, seeing that every one of us is potentially immortal, it may be wondered how we can permit ourselves to have any children at all. The explanation is twofold. In the first place, our policy is to produce new individuals of higher type than ourselves, for we are very far from biologically perfect. Consequently, we need a continuous supply of children, and as these successively reach maturity, they take over the functions of adults whose nature is less perfect, and these, when they are aware that they are no longer of service, elect to retire from life. But even though every individual sooner or later ceases to exist, the average length of life is not much less than 250,000 terrestrial years. No wonder then that we cannot accommodate many children, but we have more than might be expected, for with us, infancy and adolescence are very lengthy. The fetus is carried for 20 years. Ectogenesis was practiced by our predecessors, but was abandoned by our own species, because with greatly improved motherhood, there is no need for it. Our mothers, indeed, are both physically and mentally most vigorous during the all too rare period of pregnancy. After birth, true infancy lasts for about a century. During this period, in which the foundations of body and mind are being laid, very slowly but so securely that they will never fail, the individual is cared for by his mother. Then follow some centuries of childhood and 1,000 years of adolescence. Our children, of course, are very different beings from the children of the first man. Though physically they are in many respects still childlike, they are independent persons in the community. Each has either a house of his own or rooms in a larger building held in common by himself and his friends. Thousands of these are to be found in the neighborhood of every educational center. There are some children who prefer to live with their parents, or with one or other of their parents, but this is rare. Though there is often much friendly intercourse between parents and children, the generations usually fare better under separate roofs. This is inevitable in our species, for the adult's overwhelmingly greater experience reveals the world to him in very different proportions from those which alone are possible even to the most brilliant of children. While on the other hand, with us, the mind of every child is, in some potentiality or other, definitely superior to every adult mind. Consequently, while the child can never appreciate what is best in his elders, the adult, in spite of his power of direct insight into all minds not superior to himself, is doomed to incomprehension of all that is novel in his own offspring. 600 or 700 years after birth, a child is in some respects physically equivalent to a 10-year-old of the first man. But since his brain is destined for much higher development, it is already far more complex than any adult brain of that species. And though temperamentally he is in many ways still a child, intellectually he has already in some respects passed beyond the culture of the best adult minds of the ancient races. The traveler encountering one of our bright boys might sometimes be reminded of the wise simplicity of the legendary child Christ. But also, he might equally well discover a vast exuberance, boisterousness, impishness, and a complete inability to stand outside the child's own eager life and regard it dispassionately. In general, our children develop intellectually beyond the level of the first man long before they begin to develop the dispassionate will which is characteristic for our adults. When there is conflict between a child's personal needs and the needs of society, he will, as a rule, force himself to the social course, but he does so with resentment and dramatic self-pity, thereby rendering himself in the adult view exquisitely ridiculous. When our children attain physical adolescence, nearly 1,000 years after birth, they leave the safe paths of childhood to spend another 1,000 years in one of the Antarctic continents, known as the Land of the Young. Somewhat reminiscent of the wild continent of the fifth man, this territory is preserved as virgin bush and prairie. Subhuman grazers and carnivora abound. Volcanic eruption, hurricanes, and glacial seasons afford further attractions to the adventurous young. There is consequently a high death rate. In this land, our young people live the half-primitive, half-sophisticated life to which their nature is fitted. They hunt, fish, tend cattle, and till the ground. They cultivate all the simple beauties of human individuality. They love and hate. They sing, paint, and carve. They devise heroic myths and delight in fantasies of direct intercourse with a cosmic person. They organize themselves as tribes and nations. Sometimes they even indulge in warfare of a primitive but bloody type. Formerly, when this happened, the adult world interfered, but we have since learned to let the fever run its course. The loss of life is regrettable, but it is a small price to pay for the insight afforded even by this restricted and juvenile warfare into those primitive agonies and passions which, when they are experienced by the adult mind, are so transformed by philosophy that their import is wholly changed. In the land of the young, our boys and girls experience all that is precious and all that is abject in the primitive. They live through in their own persons, century by century, all its toilsomeness and cramped meanness, all its blind cruelty and precariousness. But also they taste its glamour, its vernal and lyrical glory. They make in little all the mistakes of thought and action that men have ever made. But at last they emerge ready for the larger and more difficult world of maturity. It was expected that someday, when we should have perfected the species, there would be no need to build up successive generations, no need of children, no need of all this schooling. It was expected that the community would then consist of adults only, and that they would be immortal not merely potentially, but in fact, yet also, of course, perennially in the flower of young maturity. Thus, death should never cut the string of individuality and scatter the hard-won pearls, necessitating new strings and laborious regatherings. The many and very delectable beauties of childhood could still be amply enjoyed in exploration of the past. We know now that this goal is not to be attained, since man's end is imminent. I'm gonna leave it in a bit of a cliffhanger. Let's take 3 minutes on Twitch of ads. And I will go for the BRB screen for this. Yeah, because there are some comments I definitely want to make, but There's some things about the land of the young here that I sort of have now hit canon personally. But you know, given the description there, it's just me inserting something that may not be there necessarily, but it's something to do with the futuristic technology they might have and all that. Anyway, let's comment on that later maybe. Let's BRB for a few minutes as the ads run on Twitch. Thank you for waiting, Tajigen. Let us continue where we left off immediately. We're not finished with chapter 15 itself, but let's finish with it as well. Then 16, then the epilogue, and then quite a few things to yap about, probably. Okay. 3. A racial awakening. It is easy to speak of children, but how can I tell you anything significant of our adult experience, in relation to which not only the world of the first man, but the worlds of the most developed earlier species seem so naive? The source of the immense difference between ourselves and all other human races lies in the sexual group, which is in fact much more than a sexual group. The designers of our species set out to produce a being that might be capable of an order of mentality higher than their own. The only possibility of doing so lay in planning a great increase of brain organization. They knew that the brain of an individual human being could not safely be allowed to exceed a certain weight. They therefore sought to produce a new order of mentality in a system of distinct and specialized brains held in telepathic unity by means of ethereal radiation. Material brains were to be capable of becoming, on some occasions, mere nodes in a system of radiation, which itself should then constitute the physical basis of a single mind. Hitherto, there had been telepathic communication between many individuals, but no super-individual or group mind. It was known that such a unity of individual minds had never been attained before, save on Mars, and it was known how lamentably the racial mind of Mars had failed to transcend the minds of the Martians. By a combination of shrewdness and good luck, the designers hit upon a policy which escaped the Martian failure. They planned as the basis of the super-individual a small, multi-sexual group. Of course, the mental unity of the sexual group is not the direct outcome of the sexual intercourse of its members. Such intercourse does occur. Groups differ from one another very greatly in this respect. But in most groups, all the members of the male sexes have intercourse with all the members of the female sexes. Those sex is with us essentially social. It is impossible for me to give any idea of the great range and intensity of experience afforded by these diverse types of union. Apart from this emotional enrichment of the individuals, the importance of sexual activity in the group lies in its bringing individuals into that extreme intimacy, temperamental harmony, and complementariness, without which no emergence into higher experience would be possible. Individuals are not necessarily confined to the same group forever. Little by little, a group may change every one of its 96 members, and yet it will remain the same super-individual mind, though enriched with the memories grafted into it by the newcomers. Very rarely does an individual leave a group before he has been in it for 10,000 years. In some groups, the members live together in a common home, in others they live apart. Sometimes an individual will form a sort of monogamous relation with another individual of his group, homing with the chosen one for many thousands of years, or even for a lifetime. Indeed, some claim that lifelong monogamy is the ideal state, so deep and delicate is the intimacy which it affords. But of course, even in monogamy, each partner must be periodically refreshed by intercourse with other members of the group, not only for the spiritual health of the two partners themselves, but also that the group mind may be maintained in full vigor. Whatever the sexual custom of the group, there is always in the mind of each member a very special loyalty toward the whole group, a peculiar sexually toned esprit de corps, unparalleled in any other species. Occasionally there is a special kind of group intercourse in which, during the actual occurrence of group mentality, all the members of one group will have intercourse with those of another. Casual intercourse outside the group is not common, but not discouraged. When it occurs, it comes as a symbolic act, crowning a spiritual intimacy. Unlike the physical sex relationship, the mental unity of the group involves all the members of the group every time it occurs, and so long as it persists. During times of group experience, the individual continues to perform his ordinary routine of work and recreation, save when some particular activity is demanded of him by the group mind itself. But all that he does as a private individual is carried out in a profound absent-mindedness. In familiar situations, he reacts correctly, even to the extent of executing familiar types of intellectual work, or entertaining acquaintances with intelligent conversation. Yet all the while he is in fact far away, wrapped in the process of the group mind. Nothing short of an urgent and unfamiliar crisis can recall him, and in recalling him it usually puts an end to the group's experience. Each member of the group is fundamentally just a highly developed human animal. He enjoys his food, he has a quick eye for sexual attraction within or without the group, he has his personal idiosyncrasies and foibles, and is pleased to ridicule the foibles of others and of himself. He may be one of those who abhor children, or one of those who enter into children's antics with fervor if they will tolerate him. He may move heaven and earth to procure permission for a holiday in the land of the young, and if he fails, as he almost surely does, he may go walking with a friend, or boating and swimming, or playing violent games, or he may merely potter in his garden, or refresh his mind though not his body, by exploring some favorite region of the past. Recreation occupies a large part of his life. For this reason, he is always glad to get back to work in due season, whether his function is to maintain some part of the material organization of our world, or to educate, or to perform scientific research, or to cooperate in the endless artistic venture of the race, or, as is more likely, to help in some of those innumerable enterprises whose nature it is impossible for me to describe. As a human individual, then, he or she is somewhat of the same type as a member of the fifth species. Here once more is the perfected glandular outfit and instinctive nature. Here too is the highly developed sense perception and intellection. As in the fifth species, so in the 18th, each individual has his own private needs, which he heartily craves to fulfill. But also in both species, he subordinates these private cravings to the good of the race absolutely and without struggle. The only kind of conflict which ever occurs between individuals is not the irreconcilable conflict of wills, but the conflict due to misunderstanding, to imperfect knowledge of the matter under dispute. And this can always be abolished by patient, telepathic explication. In addition to the brain organization necessary to this perfection of individual human nature, each member of a sexual group has in his own brain a special organ which, useless by itself, can cooperate telepathically with the special organs of other members of the group to produce a single electromagnetic system, the physical basis of the group mind. In each subsex, this organ has a peculiar form and function, and only by the simultaneous operation of the whole 96 does the group attain unified mental life. These organs do not merely enable each member to share the experience of all. Pardon me. These organs do not merely enable each member to share the experience of all, for this is already provided in the sensitivity to radiation, which is characteristic of all brain tissue in our species. By means of the harmonious activity of the special organs, a true group mind emerges, with experience far beyond the range of the individuals in isolation. This would not be possible did not the temperament and capacity of each subsex differ appropriately from those of the others. I can only hint at these differences by analogy. Among the first men, there are many temperamental types whose essential natures the psychologists of that species never fully analyzed. I may mention, however, as superficial designations of these types, the meditative, the active, the mystical, the intellectual, the artistic, the theoretical, the concrete, the placid, the highly strong. Now our subsexes differ from one another temperamentally in some such manners as these, but with a far greater range and diversity. These differences of temperament are utilized for the enrichment of a group self, such as could never have been attained by the first man, even if they had been capable of telepathic communication and electromagnetic unity, for they had not the range of specialized brain form. For all the daily business of life, then, each of us is mentally a distinct individual, though his ordinary means of communication with others is telepathic. But frequently he wakes up to be a group mind. Apart from this waking of individuals together, if I may so call it, the group mind has no existence, for his being is solely the being of the individuals comprehended together. When this communal awakening occurs, each individual experiences all the bodies of the group as his own multiple body, and perceives the world equally from all those bodies. This awakening happens to all the individuals at the same time. But over and above the simple enlargement of the experience field is the awakening into new kinds of experience. Of this, obviously, I can tell you nothing, save that it differs from the lowlier state more radically than the infant mind differs from the mind of the individual adult, and that it consists of insight into many unsuspected and previously inconceivable features of the familiar world of men and things. Hence, in our group mode, most, but not all, of the perennial philosophical puzzles, especially those connected with the nature of personality, can be so lucidly restated that they cease to be puzzles. Upon this higher plane of mentality, the sexual groups, and therefore the individuals participating in them, have social intercourse with one another as super individuals. Thus they form together a community of minded communities. For each group is a person differing from other groups in character and experience, somewhat as individuals differ. The groups themselves are not allocated to different works, in such a manner that one group should be wholly engaged in industry, another in astronomy, and so on. Only the individuals are thus allocated. In each group there will be members of many professions. The function of the group itself is purely some special manner of insight and mode of appreciation, in relation to which, of course, the work of the individuals is constantly controlled, not only while they are actually supporting the group self, but also when they have each fallen once more into the limited experience which is ordinary, individual selfhood. For though as individuals, they cannot retain clear insight into the high matters which they so recently experienced, they do remember so much as is not beyond the range of individual mentality. And in particular, they remember the bearing of the group experience upon their own conduct as individuals. Recently, another and far more penetrating kind of experience has been attained, partly by good fortune, partly through research directed by the group minds. For these have specialized themselves for particular functions in the mental life of the race, as previously the individuals were specialized for functions within the mind of a group. Very rarely and precariously has this supreme experience been achieved. In it, the individual passes beyond this group experience and becomes the mind of the race. At all times, of course, he can communicate telepathically with other individuals anywhere upon the planet, and frequently the whole race listens in while one individual addresses the world. But in the true racial experience, the situation is different. The system of radiation, which embraces the whole planet and includes the million brains of the race, becomes the physical basis of a racial self. The individual discovers himself to be embodied in all the bodies of the race. He savors in a single intuition all bodily contacts, including the mutual embraces of all lovers. Through the myriad feet of all men and women, he enfolds his world in a single grasp. He sees with all eyes, and comprehends in a single vision all visual fields. Thus he perceives at once and as a continuous, variegated sphere, the whole surface of the planet. But not only so, he now stands above the group minds as they above the individuals. He regards them as a man may regard his own vital tissues, with mingled contempt, sympathy, reverence, and dispassion. He watches them as one might study the living cells of his own brain, but also with the aloof interest of one observing an anthill, and yet again as one enthralled by the strange and diverse ways of his fellow man, and further as one who, from above the battle, watches himself and his comrades agonizing in some desperate venture, yet chiefly as the artist who has no thought but for his vision and his embodiment. In the racial mode, a man apprehends all things astronomically. Through all eyes and all observatories, he beholds his voyaging world and peers outward into space. Thus he merges in one view, as it were, the views of deckhand, captain, stoker, and the man in the crow's nest. Regarding the solar system simultaneously from both limbs of Neptune, he perceives the planets and the sun stereoscopically, as though in binocular vision. Further, his perceived now embraces not a moment, but a vast age. Thus, observing the galaxy from every point in succession along Neptune's wide orbit, and watching the near stars shift hither and thither, he actually perceives some of the constellations in 3 dimensions. Nay, with the aid of our most recent instruments, the whole galaxy appears stereoscopically. But the great nebulae and remote universes remain mere marks upon the flat sky, and in contemplation of their remoteness, man, even as the racial self of the mightiest of all human races, realizes his own minuteness and impotence. But chiefly the racial mind transcends the minds of groups and individuals in philosophical insight into the true nature of space and time, mind and its objects, cosmical striving, and cosmical perfection. Some hints of this great elucidation must presently be given, but in the main it cannot be communicated. Indeed, such insight is beyond the reach of ourselves as isolated individuals, and even beyond the group minds. When we have declined from the racial mentality, we cannot clearly remember what it was that we experienced. In particular, we have one very perplexing recollection about our racial experience, one which involves a seeming impossibility. In the racial mind, our experience was enlarged not only spatially, but temporally in a very strange manner. In respect of temporal perception, of course, minds may differ in two ways: in the length of the span which they can comprehend as now, and the minuteness of the successive events which they can discriminate within the now. As individuals, we can hold within one now a duration equal to the whole terrestrial day. And within that duration, we can, if we will, discriminate rapid pulsations such as commonly we hear together as a high musical tone. As the race mind we perceive as now, the whole period since the birth of the oldest living individuals, and the whole past of the species appeared as personal memory, stretching back into the mists of infancy. Yet we could, if we willed, discriminate within the now one light vibration from the next. In this mere increased breadth and precision of temporal perception, there is no contradiction. But how, we ask ourselves, could the race mind experience as now a vast period in which it had no existence whatsoever? Our first experience of racial mentality lasted only as long as Neptune's moon takes to complete one circuit. Before that period, the race mind was not. Yet during the month of his existence, it regarded the whole previous career of the race as present. Indeed, the racial experience has greatly perplexed us as individuals, and we can scarcely be said to remember more of it than that it was of extreme subtlety and extreme beauty. At the same time, we often have of it an impression of unspeakable horror. We who, in our familiar individual sphere, are able to regard all conceivable tragedy not merely with fortitude, but with exaltation, are obscurely conscious that as the racial mind, we have looked into an abyss of evils such as we cannot now conceive, and could not endure to conceive. Yet even this hell we know to have been acceptable as an organic member in the austere form of the cosmos. We remember obscurely, yet with a strange conviction, that all the age-long striving of the human spirit, no less than the petty cravings of individuals, was seen as a fair component in something far more admirable than itself, and that man ultimately defeated, no less than man for a while triumphant, contributes to this higher excellence. How colorless these words, how worthy of that wholly satisfying beauty of all things, which in our awakened racial mode we see face to face. Every human being, of whatever species, may occasionally glimpse some fragment or aspect of existence transfigured thus with the cold beauty which normally he cannot see. Even the first man, in their respect for tragic art, has something of this experience. The second, and still more surely the fifth, sought it deliberately. The winged seventh happened upon it while they were in the air, but their minds were cramped, and all that they could appreciate was their own small world and their own tragic story. We, the last man, have all their zest in private and in racial life, whether it fares well or ill. We have it at all times, and we have it in respect of matters inconceivable to lesser minds. We have it, moreover, intelligently. Knowing well how strange it is to admire evil along with good, we see clearly the subversiveness of this experience. Even we, as mere individuals, cannot reconcile our loyalty to the striving spirit of man with our own divine aloofness. And so, if we were mere individuals, there would remain conflict in each of us. But in the racial mode, each one of us has now experienced the great elucidation of intellect and of feeling. And though, as individuals, once more, we can never recapture that far-seeing vision, the obscure memory of it masters us always and controls all our policies. Among yourselves, The artist, after his phase of creative insight is past, and he is once more a partisan in the struggle for existence, may carry out in detail the design conceived in his brief period of clarity. He remembers, but no longer sees the vision. He tries to fashion some perceptible embodiment of the vanished splendor. So we, living our individual lives, delighting in the context of flesh, relations of minds, and all the delicate activities of human culture, cooperating and conflicting in 1,000 individual undertakings, and performing each his office in the material maintenance of our society, see all things as though transfused with light from a source which is itself no longer revealed. I have tried to tell you something of the most distinctive characteristics of our species. You can imagine that the frequent occasions of group mentality, and even more the rare occasions of race mentality, have a far-reaching effect on every individual mind, and therefore on our whole social order. Ours is in fact a society dominated, as no previous society, by a single racial purpose which is in a sense religious. Not that the individual's private efflorescence is at all thwarted by the racial purpose. Indeed, far otherwise, for that purpose demands as the first condition of its fulfillment a wealth of individual fulfillment, physical and mental. But in each mind of man or woman, the racial purpose presides absolutely, and hence it is the unquestioned motive of all social policy. Give me a second. I must not stay to describe in detail this society of ours, in which a million citizens, grouped in over 1,000 nations, lived in perfect accord without the aid of armies or even a police force. I must not tell of our much prized social organization, which assigns a unique function to each citizen, controls the procreation of new citizens of every type in relation to social need, and yet provides an endless supply of originality. We have no government and no laws, if by law is meant as stereotype conventions supported by force, and not to be altered without the aid of cumbersome machinery. Yet though our society is in this sense an anarchy, it lives by means of a very intricate system of customs, some of which are so ancient as to have become spontaneous taboos rather than deliberate conventions. It is the business of those among us who correspond to your lawyers and politicians to study these customs and suggest improvements. Those suggestions are submitted to no representative body, but to the whole world population in telepathic conference. Ours is thus, in a sense, the most democratic of all societies. Yet in another sense it is extremely bureaucratic, since it is already some millions of terrestrial years since any suggestion put forward by the College of Organizers was rejected or even seriously criticized. So thoroughly do these social engineers study their material. The only serious possibility of conflict lies now between the world population as individuals and the same individuals as group minds or racial mind. But though in these respects there have formerly occurred serious conflicts, peculiarly distressing to the individuals who experience them, such conflicts are now extremely rare. For, even as mere individuals, we are learning to trust more and more to the judgment and dictates of our own super-individual experience. It is time to grapple with the most difficult part of my whole task. Somehow, and very briefly, I must give you an idea of that outlook upon existence which has determined our racial purpose, making it essentially a religious purpose. This outlook has come to us partly through the work of individuals in scientific research and philosophic thought, partly through the influence of our group and racial experiences. You can imagine that it is not easy to describe this modern vision of the nature of things in any manner intelligible to those who have not our advantages. There is much in this vision which will remind you of your mystics, yet between them and us there is far more difference than similarity, in respect both of the matter and the manner of our thought. For while they are confident that the cosmos is perfect, we are sure only that it is very beautiful. While they pass to their conclusion without the aid of intellect, we have used that staff every step of the way. Thus, even when in respect of conclusions we agree with your mystics rather than your plodding intellectuals, in respect of method, we applaud most your intellectuals, for they scorn to deceive themselves, with comfortable fantasies. Four, cosmology. We find ourselves living in a vast and boundless yet finite order of spatio-temporal events, and each of us, as the racial mind, has learned that there are other such orders, other and incommensurable spheres of events, related to our own neither spatially nor temporally, but in another mode of eternal being. Of the contents of those alien spheres we know almost nothing but that they are incomprehensible to us, even in our racial mentality. Within the spatio-temporal sphere of ours, we remark what we call the beginning and what we call the end. In the beginning, there came into existence, we know not how, that all-pervading and unimaginably tenuous gas, which was the parent of all material and spiritual existence within time's known span. It was in fact a very multitudinous yet precisely numbered host. From the crowding together of this great population into many swarms, arose in time the nebulae, each of which in turn condenses as a galaxy, a universe of stars. The stars have their beginnings and their ends, and for a few moments, somewhere in between their beginnings and their ends, a few, very few, may support mind. But in due course will come the universal end, when all the wreckage of the galaxies will have drifted together as a single, barren, and seemingly changeless ash, in the midst of a chaos of unavailing energy. But the cosmic events which we call the beginning and the end are final only in relation to our ignorance of the events which lie beyond them. We know, and as the racial mind we have apprehended as a clear necessity, that not only space but time also is boundless, though finite. For in a sense time is cyclic. After the end, events unknowable will continue to happen during a period much longer than that which will have passed since the beginning. But at length, there will recur the identical event, which was itself also the beginning. Yet though time is cyclic, it is not repetitive. There is no other time within which it can repeat itself. For time is but an abstraction from the successiveness of events. For time is but an abstraction from the successiveness of events that pass. And since all events whatsoever form together a cycle of successiveness, there is nothing constant in relation to which there can be repetition. And so the succession of events is cyclic, yet not repetitive. The birth of the all-pervading gas in the so-called beginning is no merely similar to another such birth to occur long after us, and long after the cosmic end, so-called. The past beginning is the future beginning. From the beginning to the end is but the span from one spoke to the next on time's great wheel. There is a vaster span, stretching beyond the end and round to the beginning. Of the events therein we know nothing, save that there must be such events. Everywhere within time's cycle there is endless passage of events. In a continuous flux they occur and vanish, yielding to their successors. Yet each one of them is eternal. Though passages of their very nature, and without passage they are nothing, yet they have eternal being. But their passage is no illusion. They have eternal being, yet eternally they exist with passage. In our racial mode, we see clearly that this is so. But in our individual mode, it remains a mystery. Yet even in our individual mode, we must accept both sides of this mysterious antinomy as a fiction needed for the rationalizing of our experience. The beginning precedes the end by some 100 million terrestrial years, and succeeds it by a period at least 9 times longer. In the middle of the smaller span lies the still shorter period within which alone the living worlds can occur, and they are very few. One by one they dawn into mentality and die, successive blooms in life's short summer. Before that season and after it, even to the beginning and to the end, and even before the beginning and after the end, sleep, utter oblivion. Not before there are stars, and not after the stars are chilled, can there be life. And then, rarely, In our own galaxy, there have occurred hitherto some 20,000 worlds that have conceived life. And of these, a few score have attained or surpassed the mentality of the first man. But of those that have reached this development, man has now outstripped the rest. And today, man alone survives. There are the millions of other galaxies, for instance the Andromedan island. We have some reason to surmise that in that favored universe man may have attained to insight and power incomparably greater than our own. But all that we know for certain is that it contains 4 worlds of high order. Of the host of other universes that lie within range of our mind-detecting instruments, none have produced anything comparable with man. But there are many universes too remote to be estimated. You may wonder how we have come to detect these remote lives and intelligences. I can say only that the occurrence of mentality produces certain minute astronomical effects, to which our instruments are sensitive even at great distances. These effects increase slightly with the mere mass of living matter on any astronomical body, but far more with its mental and spiritual development. Long ago it was the spiritual development of the world community of the fifth man that dragged the moon from its orbit. And in our own case, so numerous is our society today, and so greatly developed in mental and spiritual activities, that only by continuous expense of physical energy can we preserve the solar system from confusion. We have another means of detecting minds remote from us in space. We can, of course, enter into past minds wherever they are, so long as they are intelligible to us, and we have tried to use this power for the discovery of remote-minded worlds. But in general, the experience of such minds is too different in fiber from our own for us to be able even to detect its existence. And so our knowledge of minds in other worlds is almost wholly derived from their physical effects. We cannot say that nowhere save on those rare bodies called planets does life ever occur. For we have evidence that in a few of the younger stars there is life, and even intelligence. How it persists in an incandescent environment we know not, nor whether it is perhaps the life of the star as a whole, as a single organism, or the life of many flame-like inhabitants of the star. All that we know is that no star in its prime has life, and therefore that the lives of the younger ones are probably doomed. Again, we know that mind occurs, though very seldom, on a few extremely old stars, no longer incandescent. What the future of these minds will be, we cannot tell. Perhaps it is with them, and not with man, that the hope of the cosmos lies. But at present they are all primitive. Today, nothing anywhere in this galaxy of ours can compare with man in respect of vision and mental creativeness. We have therefore come to regard our community as of some importance, especially so in the light of our metaphysics. But I can only hint at our metaphysical vision of things by means of metaphors, which will convey at best a caricature of that vision. In the beginning, there was great potency, but little form. And the spirit slept as the multitude of discrete primordial existence. Thenceforth, there has been a long and fluctuating adventure toward harmonious complexity of form, and toward the awakening of the spirit into unity, knowledge, delight, and self-expression. And this is the goal of all living, that the cosmos may be known and admired, and that it may be crowned with further beauties. Nowhere and at no time, so far as we can tell, at least within our own galaxy, has the adventure reached further than in ourselves. And in us, what has been achieved is but a minute beginning, but it is a real beginning. Man in our day has gained some depth of insight, some breadth of knowledge, some power of creation, some faculty of worship. We have looked far afield. We have probed not altogether superficially into the nature of existence, and have found it very beautiful, though also terrible. We have created a not inconsiderable community, and we have wakened together to be the unique spirit of that community. We had proposed to ourselves a very long and arduous future, which should culminate at some time before the end in the complete achievement of the spirit's ideal. But now we know that disaster is already near at hand. When we are in full possession of our faculties, we are not distressed by this fate. For we know that though our fair community must cease, it has also indestructible being. We have at least carved into one region of the eternal real a form which has beauty of no mean order. The great company of diverse and most lovely men and women in all their subtle relationships, striving within a single purpose toward the goal which is mind's final goal, the community and super-individuality of that great host, the beginnings of further insight and creativeness upon the higher plane. These surely are real achievements, even though, in the larger view, they are minute achievements. Yet though we are not at all dismayed by our own extinction, we cannot but wonder whether or not in the far future, some other spirit will fulfill the cosmic ideal, or whether we ourselves are the modest crown of existence. Unfortunately, though we can explore the past wherever there are intelligible minds, we cannot enter into the future. And so in vain we ask, will ever any spirit awake to gather all spirits into itself, to elicit from the stars their full flower of beauty, to know all things together and admire all things justly? If in the far future this end will be achieved, it is really achieved even now, for whenever it occurs, its being is eternal. But on the other hand, if it is indeed achieved eternally, this achievement must be the work of spirits or a spirit not wholly unlike ourselves, though infinitely greater, and the physical location of that spirit must lie in the far future. But if no future spirit will achieve this end before it dies, then, though the cosmos is indeed very beautiful, it is not perfect. I said that we regard the cosmos as very beautiful, yet it is also very terrible. For ourselves, it is easy to look forward with equanimity to our end, and even to the end of our admired community, for what we prize most is the excellent beauty of the cosmos. But there are the myriads of spirits who have never entered into that vision. They have suffered, and they were not permitted that consolation. There are, first, the incalculable hosts of lowly creatures scattered all over all the ages and all the minded worlds. Theirs was only a dream life, and their misery not often poignant, but nonetheless they are to be pitied for having missed the more poignant experience in which alone spirit can find fulfillment. Then there are the intelligent beings, human and otherwise, the many-minded worlds throughout the galaxies. They have struggled into cognizance, streaming for they knew not what, tasted brief delights and lived in the shadow of pain and death, until at last their life has been crushed out by careless fate. In our solar system there are the Martians, insanely and miserably obsessed, the native Venerians, imprisoned in their ocean and murdered for man's sake, and all the hosts of the forerunning human species. A few individuals, no doubt in every period, and many in certain favored races, had lived on the whole happily, and a few have even known something of the supreme beatitude. But for most, until our modern epoch, thwarting has outweighed fulfillment, and if actual grief has not preponderated over joy, it is because, mercifully, the fulfillment that is wholly missed cannot be conceived. Our predecessors of the 16th species, oppressed by this vast horror, undertook a forlorn and seemingly irrational crusade for the rescue of the tragic past. We see now clearly that their enterprise, though desperate, was not quite fantastic. For if ever the cosmic ideal should be realized, even though for a moment only, then in that time the awakened soul of all will embrace within itself all spirits whatever throughout the whole of time's wide circuit. And so to each one of them, even to the least, it will seem that he has awakened and discovered himself to be the soul of all, knowing all things and rejoicing in all things. And though afterwards, through the inevitable decay of the stars, this most glorious vision must be lost, suddenly or in the long drawn-out defeat of life, yet would the awakened soul of all have eternal being, and in it each martyred spirit would have beatitude eternally, though unknown to itself, in its own temporal mode. It may be that this is the case. If not, then eternally the martyred spirits are martyred only, and not blessed. We cannot tell which of these possibilities is fact. As individuals, we earnestly desire that the eternal being of things may include the supreme awakening. This, nothing less than this, has been the remote but ever-present goal of our practical religious life and of our social policy. In our racial mode also we have greatly desired this end, but differently. Even as individuals, all our desires are tempered by that relentless admiration of fate, which we recognize as the spirit's highest achievement. Even as individuals, we exult in the issue whether our enterprises succeed or fail. The pioneer defeated, the lover bereaved and overwhelmed, can find in his disaster the supreme experience, the dispassionate ecstasy which salutes the real as it is. It would not change one jot of it. Even as individuals, we can regard the impending extinction of mankind as a thing superb, though tragic. Strong in the knowledge that the human spirit has already inscribed the cosmos with indestructible beauty, and that inevitably, whether sooner or later, man's career must end, we face this too sudden end with laughter in our hearts and peace. But there is one thought by which, in our individual state, we are still dismayed. Namely that the cosmos enterprise itself may fail, that the full potentiality of the real may never find expression, that never, in any stage of time, the multitudinous and conflicting existence should be organized as the universal, harmonious living body, that the spirit's eternal nature, therefore, should be discordant, miserably tranced, that the indestructible beauties of this our sphere of space and time should remain imperfect, and remain too not adequately worshipped. But in the racial mind, this ultimate dread has no place. On those few occasions when we have awakened racially, we have come to regard with piety, even, the possibility of cosmical defeat. For as the racial mind, though in a manner we earnestly desire the fulfillment of the cosmical ideal, yet we were no more enslaved to this desire than, as individuals, we are enslaved to our private desires. For though the racial mind wills this supreme achievement, yet in the same act it holds itself aloof from it, and from all desire and all emotion, save the ecstasy which admires the real as it is, and accepts its dark, bright form with joy. As individuals, therefore, we try to regard the whole cosmic adventure as a symphony now in progress, which may or may not someday achieve its just conclusion. Like music, however, the vast biography of the stars is to be judged not in respect of his final moment merely, but in respect of the perfection of his whole form, and whether his form as a whole is perfect or not, we cannot know. Actual music is a pattern of intertwining themes which evolve and die, and these again are woven of simpler members which again are spun of chords and unitary tones. But the music of the spheres is of a complexity almost infinitely more subtle, and its themes rank above and below one another in hierarchy beyond hierarchy. None but a god, none but a mind subtle as the music itself, could hear the whole in all its detail, and grasp in one act this close-knit individuality, if such it has. Not for any human mind to say authoritatively, "This is music, wholly," or to say, "This is mere noise, flecked now and then by shreds of significance." The music of the spheres is unlike other music not only in respect of its richness, but also in the nature of its medium. It is a music not merely of sounds, but of souls. Each of its minor themes, each of its chords, each single tone of it, each tremor of each tone, is in its own degree more than a mere passive factor in the music. It is a listener, and also a creator. Wherever there is individuality of form, there is also an individual appreciator and originator. And the more complex the form, the more percipient and active the spirit. Thus, in every individual factor within the musical environment of that factor is experienced, vaguely or precisely, erroneously, or with greater approximation to truth. And, being experienced, it is admired or loathed, rightly or falsely.
and it is influenced.
Just as in actual music, each theme is in a manner a determination of its forerunners and followers and present accompaniment, so in this vaster music, each individual factor is itself a determination of its environment. Also, it is a determinant, both of that which precedes and that which follows. But whether these manifold in their determinations are after all haphazard, or as in music, controlled in relation to the beauty of the whole, we know not. Nor whether, if this is the case, the beautiful whole of things is the work of some mind, nor yet whether some mind admires it adequately as a whole of beauty. But this we know, that we ourselves, when the spirit is most awake in us, admire the real as it is revealed to us, and salute its dark bright form with joy. Chapter 16. 1. Sentence of death. Ours has been essentially a philosophical age, in fact a supreme age of philosophy. But a great practical problem has also concerned us. We have had to prepare for the task of preserving humanity during a most difficult period which was calculated to being about 100 million years hence, but might, in certain circumstances, be sprung upon us at very short notice. Long ago, the human inhabitants of Venus believed that already in their day, the sun was about to enter the white dwarf phase, and that the time would therefore soon come when their world would be frostbound. This calculation was unduly pessimistic, but we now know that, even allowing for the slight delay caused by the Great Collision, the solar collapse must begin at some date astronomically not very distant. We had planned that during the comparatively brief period of the actual shrinkage, we would move our planet steadily nearer to the Sun, until finally it should settle in the narrowest possible orbit. Man would then be comfortably placed for a very long period, but in the fullness of time there would come a far more serious crisis. The Sun would continue to cool, and alas, man would no longer be able to live by means of solar radiation. It would become necessary to annihilate matter to supply the deficiency. The other planets might be used for this purpose, and possibly the Sun itself. Or, given the sustenance for so long a voyage, man might boldly project his planet into the neighborhood of some younger star. Thenceforth, perhaps, he might operate upon a far grander scale. He might explore and colonize all suitable worlds in every corner of the galaxy, and organize himself as a vast community of minded worlds. Even, so we dreamed, he might achieve intercourse with other galaxies. It did not seem impossible that man himself was the germ of the world soul, which, we still hope, is destined to awake for a while before the universal decline, and to crown the eternal cosmos with its due of knowledge and admiration, fleeting yet eternal. We dare to think that in some far distant epoch, the human spirit, clothed in all wisdom, power, and delight, might look back upon our primitive age with a certain respect, no doubt with pity also and amusement, but nonetheless with admiration for the spirit in us, still only half awake and struggling against great disabilities. In such a mood, half pity, half admiration, we ourselves look back upon the primitive mankinds. Our prospect has now suddenly and completely changed. For astronomers have made a startling discovery, which assigns to man a speedy end. His existence has ever been precarious. At any stage of his career, he might easily have been exterminated by some slight alteration of his chemical environment, by a more than usually malignant microbe, by a radical change of climate, or by the manifold effects of his own folly. Twice already he has been almost destroyed by astronomical events. How easy might it happen that the solar system, now rushing through a somewhat more crowded region of the galaxy, should become entangled with, or actually strike, a major astronomical body and be destroyed. But fate, as it turns out, has a more surprising end in store for man. Not long ago, an unexpected alteration was observed to be taking place in a near star. Though through no discoverable cause, it began to change from white to violet and increase in brightness. Already it has attained such extravagant brilliance that, though its actual disk remains a mere point in our sky, its dazzling purple radiance illuminates our nocturnal landscapes with hideous beauty. Our astronomers have ascertained that this is no ordinary nova, that it is not one of those stars addicted to paroxysms of brilliance. It is something unprecedented, a normal star suffering from a unique disease, a fantastic acceleration of its vital process, a righteous squandering of the energy which should have remained locked within its substance for eons. At the present rate, it will be reduced either to an inert cinder or to actual annihilation in a few thousand years. This extraordinary event may possibly have been produced by unwise tamperings on the part of intelligent beings in the star's neighborhood. But indeed, since all matter at very high temperature is in a state of unstable equilibrium, the cause may have been merely some conjunction of natural circumstances. The event was first regarded simply as an intriguing spectacle, but further study roused a more serious interest. Our own planet, and therefore the sun also, was suffering a continuous and increasing bombardment of ethereal vibrations, most of which were of incredibly high frequency and of unknown potentiality. What would be their effect upon the sun? After some centuries, certain astronomical bodies in the neighborhood of the deranged star were seen to be infected with its disorder. Their fever increased the splendor of our night sky, but it also confirmed our fears. We still hoped that the sun might prove too distant to be seriously influenced, but careful analysis now showed that this hope must be abandoned. The sun's remoteness might cause a delay of some thousands of years before the cumulative effects of the bombardment could start the disintegration. But sooner or later, the sun itself must be infected. Probably within 30,000 years, life will be impossible anywhere within a vast radius of the sun. So vast a radius that it is quite impossible to propel our planet away fast enough to escape before the storm can catch us. Okay. Wow. Oh my god, this part we just got through. Oh my god. The stuff right before the chapter 16. I forgot a lot of that. I can't believe I actually forgot a lot of that. How I thought a lot of that was Morning Star Maker, but no, Last and First Man had some. Oh my god, that thing about time and the eternal and oh my god. Hopefully I can talk a little bit about it afterwards because words cannot begin to describe everything about it. We're gonna take another 3-minute ad break on Twitch. Time is flying by, kind of feels like. I mean, reading all this does that to an extent. I'm kind of gonna go back to that and maybe make some notes to talk about as well. With what I want to yap about afterwards. But alright, let's take a few minutes, alright? We'll BRB again. Thank you for waiting. Omatase shimashita, Tajigen. I think now, on this second hour, this third hour, really, of the stream, we're indeed heading towards the end of it. Towards the end of what we're gonna do in the book today. The rest of chapter 16, there's an epilogue, and then let's go for it. 5 streams it's been. Suzukimasho, let's continue. 2. Behavior of the condemned. The discovery of this doom kindled in us unfamiliar emotions. Hitherto, humanity has seemed to be destined for a very long future, and the individual himself had been accustomed to look forward to very many thousands of years of personal life, ending in voluntary sleep. We had of course often conceived, and even savored in imagination, the sudden destruction of our world. But now we faced it as a fact. Give me a second, sorry. I'm writing something down that I just remembered for the yapping afterwards. Okay. Outwardly, everyone behaved with perfect serenity, but inwardly every mind was in turmoil. Not that there was any question of our falling into panic or despair, for in this crisis our native detachment stood us in good stead. But inevitably some time passed before our minds became properly adjusted to the new prospect, before we could see our fate outlined clearly and beautifully against the cosmic background. Presently, however, we learned to contemplate the whole great saga of man as a completed work of art, and to admire it no less for its sudden and tragic end than for the promise in it which was not to be fulfilled. Grief was now transfigured wholly into ecstasy. Defeat, which had oppressed us with a sense of man's impotence and littleness among the stars, brought us into a new sympathy and reverence for all those myriads of beings in the past, out of whose obscure strivings we had been born. We saw the most brilliant of our own race, and the lowliest of our pre-human forerunners, as essentially spirits of equal excellence, though cast in diverse circumstances. When we looked round on the heavens, and at the violet splendor which was to destroy us, we were filled with awe and pity, awe for the inconceivable potentiality of this bright host, pity for its self-thwarting effort to fulfill itself as the universal spirit. At this stage it seemed that there was nothing left for us to do but to crowd as much excellence as possible into our remaining life, and meet our end in the noblest manner. But now there came upon us, once more, the rare experience of racial mentality. For a whole Neptunian year, every individual lived in an enraptured trance, in which, as a racial mind, he or she resolved many ancient mysteries and saluted many unexpected beauties. This ineffable experience, lived through under the shadow of death, was the flower of man's whole being. But I can tell nothing of it, save that when it was over we possessed, even as individuals, a new peace, in which, strangely but harmoniously, were blended grief, exaltation, and godlike laughter. In consequence of this racial experience, we found ourselves faced with 2 tasks which had not before been contemplated. The one referred to the future, the other to the past. In respect of the future, we are now setting about the forlorn task of disseminating among the stars the seeds of a new humanity. For this purpose we shall make use of the pressure of radiation from the sun, and chiefly the extravagantly potent radiation that will later be available. We are hoping to devise extremely minute electromagnetic wave systems akin to normal protons and electrons, which will be individually capable of sailing forward upon the hurricane of solar radiation at a speed not only incomparable with the speed of light itself. This is a difficult task. But further, these units must be so cunningly interrelated that, in favorable conditions, they may tend to combine to form spores of life and to develop not indeed into human beings, but into lowly organisms with a definite evolutionary bias toward the essentials of human nature. These objects we shall project from beyond our atmosphere
and immense quantities at certain points of our planet's orbit, so that solar radiation may carry them toward the most promising regions of the galaxy. The chance that any of them will survive to reach their destination is small, and still smaller the chance that any of them will find a suitable environment. But if any of this human seed should fall upon good ground, it will embark, we hope, upon a somewhat rapid biological evolution and produce in due season whatever complex organic forms are possible in its environment. It will have a very real physiological bias toward the evolution of intelligence. Indeed, it will have a much greater bias in that direction than occurred on the Earth in those subvital atomic groupings from which terrestrial life eventually sprang. It is just conceivable, then, that by extremely good fortune, man may still influence the future of this galaxy, not directly, but through his creature. But in the vast music of existence, the actual theme of mankind now ceases forever. Finished the long reiterations of man's history, defeated the whole proud enterprise of his maturity. The stored experience of many mankinds must sink into oblivion, and today's wisdom must vanish. The other task which occupies us, that which relates to the past, is one which may very well seem to you nonsensical. We have long been able to enter into past minds and participate in their experience. Hitherto, we have been passive spectators merely, but recently we have acquired the power of influence in past minds. This seems an impossibility, for a past event is what it is, and how can it conceivably be altered at a subsequent date, even in the minutest respect? Now it is true that past events are what they are, irrevocably. But in certain cases, some feature of a past event may depend on an event in the far future. The past event would never have been as it actually was, and is eternally, if there had not been going to be a certain future event, which, though not contemporaneous with the past event, influences it directly in the sphere of eternal being. The passage of events is real, and time is the successiveness of passing events. But though events have passage, they also have eternal being. And in certain rare cases, mental events far separated in time determine one another directly by way of eternity. Our own minds have often been profoundly influenced by direct inspection of past minds, and now we find that certain events of certain past minds are determined by present events in our own present minds. No doubt there are some past mental events, which are what they are by virtue of mental process, which we shall perform, but have not yet performed. Our historians and psychologists, engaged in direct inspection of past minds, had often complained of certain singular points in past minds, where the ordinary laws of psychology failed to give a full explanation of the course of mental events, where, in fact, some wholly unknown influence seemed to be at work. Later, it was found that, in some cases at least, this disturbance of the ordinary principles of psychology corresponded with certain thoughts or desires in the mind of the observer living in our own age. Of course, only such matters as could have significance to the past mind could influence it at all. Thoughts and desires of ours which have no meaning to the particular past fail to enter into his experience. New ideas and new values are only to be introduced by arranging familiar matter so that it may gain a new significance. Nevertheless, we now find ourselves in possession of an amazing power of communicating with the past and contributing to its thought and action, though of course we could not alter it. But, it may be asked, what if, in respect of a particular singularity in some past mind, we do not, after all, choose to provide the necessary influence to account for it? The question is meaningless. There is no possibility that we should not choose to influence those past minds which are, as a matter of fact, dependent on our influence. For it is in the sphere of eternity, wherein alone we meet past minds, that we really make this free choice. And in the sphere of time, though the choosing has relations with our modern age, and may be said to occur in that age, it also has relations with the past mind, and may be said to have occurred also long ago. There are, in some past minds, singularities which are not the product of any influence that we have exerted today. Some of these singularities, no doubt, we shall ourselves produce on some occasion before our destruction. But it may be that some are due to an influence other than ours, perhaps to beings which, by good fortune, may spring long hence from our forlorn seminal enterprise, or they may be due perhaps to the cosmic mind, whose future occurrence and eternal existence we earnestly desire. However that may be, there are a few remarkable minds, scattered up and down past ages and even in the most primitive human races, which suggest an influence other than our own. They are so singular in one respect or another that we cannot give a perfectly clear psychological account of them in terms of the past only. And yet we ourselves are not the instigators of their singularity. Your Jesus, your Socrates, your Gautama show traces of this uniqueness. But the most original of all were too eccentric to have any influence on their contemporaries. It is possible that in ourselves also there are singularities which cannot be accounted for wholly in terms of ordinary biological and psychological laws. If we could prove that this is the case, we should have very definite evidence of the occurrence of a high order of mentality somewhere in the future, and therefore of its eternal existence. But hitherto this problem has proved too subtle for us, even in the racial mode. It may be that the mere fact that we have succeeded in attaining racial mentality involves some remote future influence. It is even conceivable that every creative advance that any mind has ever made involves unwitting cooperation with the cosmic mind, which, perhaps, will awake at some date before the end. We have two methods of influence in the past through past individuals, for we can operate either upon minds of great originality and power, or upon any average individual whose circumstances happen to suit our purpose. In original minds, we can only suggest some very vague intuition, which is then worked up by the individual himself into some form very different from that which we intended, but very potent as a factor in the culture of his age. Average minds, on the other hand, we can use as passive instruments for the conveyance of detailed ideas. But in such cases, the individual is incapable of working up the material into a great and potent form suited to his age. But what is it, you may ask, that we seek to contribute to the past? We seek to afford intuitions of truth and of value, which, though easy to us from our point of vantage, will be impossible to the unaided past. We seek to help the past to make the best of itself, just as one man may help another. We seek to direct the attention of past individuals and past races to truths and beauties which, though implicit in their experience, would otherwise be overlooked. We seek to do this for two reasons. Entering into past minds, we become perfectly acquainted with them and cannot but love them, and so we desire to help them. By influencing selected individuals, we seek to influence indirectly great multitudes. But our second motive is very different. We see the career of man in his successive planetary homes as a process of very great beauty. It is far indeed from the perfect, but it is very beautiful, with the beauty of tragic art. Now, it turns out that this beautiful thing entails our operation at various points in the past. Therefore, we will to operate. Unfortunately, our first inexperienced efforts were disastrous. Many of the fatuities which primitive minds in all ages have been prone to attribute to the influence of disembodied spirits, whether deities, fiends, or the dead, are but the gibberish which resulted from our earliest experiments. And this book, so admirable in our conception, has issued from the brain of the writer, your contemporary, in such disorder as to be mostly rubbish. We are concerned with the past not only insofar as we make very rare contributions to it, but chiefly in two other manners. First, we are engaged upon the great enterprise of becoming lovingly acquainted with the past, the human past, in every detail. This is, so to speak, our supreme act of filial piety. When one being comes to know and love another, a new and beautiful thing is created, namely the love. The cosmos is thus far, and at that date, enhanced. We seek then to know and love every past mind that we can enter. In most cases, we can know them with far more understanding than they can know themselves. Not the least of them, not the worst of them, shall be left out of this great work of understanding and admiration. There is another manner in which we are concerned with the human past. We need its help. For we who are triumphantly reconciled to our fate are under obligation to devote our last energies not to ecstatic contemplation, but to a forlorn and most uncongenial task, the dissemination. This task is almost intolerably repugnant to us. Gladly would we spend our last days in embellishing our community and our culture, and in pious exploration of the past. But it is incumbent on us, who are by nature artists and philosophers, to direct the whole attention of our world upon the arid labor of designing an artificial human seed, producing it in immense quantities and projecting it among the stars. If there is to be any possibility of success, we must undertake a very lengthy program of physical research and finally organize a worldwide system of manufacture. The work will not be completed until our physical constitution is already being undermined and the disintegration of our community has already begun. Now, we could never fulfill this policy without a zealous conviction of its importance. Here it is that the past can help us. We, who have now learned so thoroughly the supreme art of ecstatic fatalism, go humbly to the past to learn over again that other supreme achievement of the spirit, loyalty to the forces of life and battled against the forces of death. Wandering among the heroic and often forlorn ventures of the past, we are fired once more with primitive zeal. Thus, when we return to our own world, we are able, even while we preserve in our hearts the peace that passeth understanding, to struggle as though we cared only for victory. Three. Epilogue. I am speaking to you now, from a period about 20,000 terrestrial years after the date at which the whole preceding part of this book was communicated. It has become very difficult to reach you, and still more difficult to speak to you, for already the last men are not the men they were. Our two great undertakings are still unfinished. Much of the human past remains imperfectly explored, and the projection of the seed is scarcely begun. That enterprise has proved far more difficult than was expected. Only within the last few years have we succeeded in designing an artificial human dust capable of being carried forward on the sun's radiation, hardy enough to endure the conditions of a transgalactic voyage of many millions of years, and yet intricate enough to bear the potentiality of life and of spiritual development. We are now preparing to manufacture the seminal matter in great quantities and to cast it into space at suitable points on the planet's orbit. Some centuries have now passed since the sun began to show the first symptoms of disintegration, namely a slight change of color toward the blue, followed by a definite increase of brightness and heat. Today, when he pierces the ever-thickening cloud, he smites us with an intolerable steely brilliance, which destroys the sight of anyone foolish enough to face it. Even in the cloudy weather which is now normal, the eye is wounded by the fierce violet glare. Eye trouble afflicts us all, in spite of the special glasses which have been designed to protect us. The mere heat, too, is already destructive. We are forcing our planet outward from its old orbit in an ever-widening spiral, but do what we will, we cannot prevent the climate from becoming more and more deadly, even at the poles. The intervening regions have already been deserted. Evaporation of the equatorial oceans has thrown the whole atmosphere into tumult, so that even at the poles we are tormented by hot, wet hurricanes and incredible electric storms. These have already shattered most of our great buildings, sometimes burying a whole teeming province under an avalanche of vitreous cracks. Our two polar communities at first managed to maintain radio communication, but it is now some time since we of the South received news of the more distressed North. Even with us, the situation is already desperate. We had recently established some hundreds of stations for the dissemination, but less than a score have been able to operate. This failure is due mainly to an increasing lack of personnel. The deluge of fantastic solar radiation has had disastrous effect on the human organism. Epidemics of a malignant tumor, which medical science has failed to conquer, have reduced the southern people to a mere remnant and this in spite of the migration of the tropical races into the Antarctic. Each of us, moreover, is but the wreckage of his former self. The higher mental functions, attained only in the most developed human species, are already lost or disordered through the breakdown of their special tissues. Not only has the racial mind vanished, but the sexual groups have lost their mental unity. 3 of the subsexes have already been exterminated by the arrangement of their chemical nature. Glandular troubles, indeed, have unhinged many of us with anxieties and loathings which we cannot conquer, though we know them to be unreasonable. Even the normal power of telepathic communication has become so unreliable that we have been compelled to fall back upon the archaic practice of vocal symbolism. Exploration of the past is now confined to specialists and is a dangerous profession, which may lead to disorders of temporal experience. Degeneration of the higher neural centers has also brought about in us a far more serious and deep-seated trouble, namely a general spiritual degradation, which would formerly have seemed impossible, so confident were we of our integrity. The perfectly dispassionate will had been for many millions of years universal among us, and the cornerstone of our whole society and culture. We had almost forgotten that it has a physiological basis, and that if that basis were undermined, we might no longer be capable of rational conduct. But, drenched for some thousands of years by the unique stellar radiation, we have gradually lost not only the ecstasy of dispassionate worship, but even the capacity for normal, disinterested behavior. Everyone is now liable to an irrational bias in favor of himself as a private person, as against his fellows. Personal envy, uncharitableness, even murder and gratuitous cruelty, formerly unknown amongst us, are now becoming common. At first, when men began to notice in themselves these archaic impulses, they crushed them with amused contempt. But as the highest nerve centers fell further into decay, the brute in us began to be ever more unruly, and the human more uncertain. Rational conduct was henceforth to be achieved only after an exhausting and degrading moral struggle, instead of spontaneously and fluently. Nay, worse, increasingly often the struggle ended not in victory, but in defeat. Imagine then the terror and disgust that gripped us when we found ourselves one and all condemned to a desperate struggle against the impulses which we had been accustomed to regard as insane. It is distressing enough to know that each one of us might at any moment, merely to help some dear individual or other, betray his supreme duty toward the dissemination. But it is harrowing to discover ourselves sometimes so far sunk as to be incapable even of common loving kindness toward our neighbors. For a man to favor himself against his friend or beloved, even in the slightest respect, was formerly unknown. But today many of us are haunted by the look of amazed horror and pity in the eyes of an injured friend. In the early stages of our trouble, lunatic asylums were founded, but they soon became overcrowded and a burden on a stricken community. The insane were then killed, but it became clear that by former standards, we were all insane. No man now can trust himself to behave reasonably. And, of course, we cannot trust each other. Partly through the prevalent irrationality of desire, and partly through the misunderstandings which have come with the loss of telepathic communication, we have been plunged into all manner of discords. A political constitution and system of laws had to be devised, but they seem to have increased our troubles. Order of a kind is maintained by an overworked police force, but this is in the hands of the professional organizers who have now all the vices of bureaucracy. It was largely through their folly that 2 of the Antarctic nations broke into social revolution and are now preparing to meet the armament which an insane world government is devising for their destruction. Meanwhile, through the breakdown of the economic order and the impossibility of reaching the food factories on Jupiter, starvation is added to our troubles and has afforded to certain ingenious lunatics the opportunity of trading at the expense of others. All this folly in a doomed world, and in a community that was yesterday the very flower of a galaxy. Those of us who still care for the life of the spirit are tempted to regret that mankind did not choose decent suicide before ever the putrescence began. But indeed, this could not be. The task that was undertaken had to be completed. For the scattering of the seed has come to be for every one of us the supreme religious duty. Even those who continually sin against it recognize this as the last office of man. It was for this that we outstayed our time, and must watch ourselves decline from spiritual estate into that brutishness from which man has so seldom freed himself. Yet why do we persist in the forlorn effort? Even if by good luck the seed should take root somewhere and thrive, there will surely come an end to its adventure, if not swiftly in fire, then in the ultimate battle of life against encroaching frost. Our labor will at best sow for death an ampler harvest. There seems no rational defense of it, unless it be rational to carry out blindly a purpose conceived in a former and more enlightened state. But we cannot feel sure that we really were more enlightened. We look back now at our former selves with wonder, but also with incomprehension and misgiving. We try to recall the glory that seemed to be revealed to each of us in the racial mind, but we remember almost nothing of it. We cannot rise even to that more homely beatitude, which was once within the reach of the unaided individual. That serenity which, it seemed, should be the spirit's answer to every tragic event. It is gone from us. It is not only impossible, but inconceivable. We now see our private distresses and the public calamity as merely hideous, that after so long a struggle into maturity, man should be roasted alive like a trap mouse for the entertainment of a lunatic. How can any beauty lie in that? But this is not our last word to you, for though we have fallen, there is still something in us left over from the time that is past. We have become blind and weak, but the knowledge that we are so has forced us to a great effort. Those of us who have not already sunk too far have formed themselves into a brotherhood for mutual strengthening, so that the true human spirit may be maintained a little longer, until the seed has been well sown and death be permissible. We call ourselves the Brotherhood of the Condemned. We seek to be faithful to one another and to our common undertaking and to the vision which is no longer revealed. We are vowed to the comforting of all distressed persons who are not yet permitted death. We are vowed also to the dissemination, and we are vowed to keep the spirit bright until the end. Now and again we meet together in little groups or great companies to hearten ourselves with one another's presence. Sometimes on these occasions we can but sit in silence, groping for consolation and for strength. Sometimes the spoken word flickers hither and thither amongst us, shedding a brief light but little warmth to the soul that lies freezing in a torrid world. But there is among us one, moving from place to place and company to company, whose voice all long to hear. He is young, the last born of the last man, for he was the latest to be conceived before we learned man's doom and put an end to all conceiving. Being the latest, he is also the noblest. Not him alone, but all his generation we salute and look to for strength. But he, the youngest, is different from the rest. In him the spirit, which is but the flesh awakened into spirituality, has power to withstand the tempest of solar energy longer than the rest of us. It is as though the sun itself were eclipsed by this spirit's brightness. It is as though in him, at last, and for a day only, man's promise were fulfilled. For though, like others, he suffers in the flesh, he is above his suffering. And though more than the rest of us, he feels the suffering of others, he is above his pity. In his comforting, there is a strange, sweet raillery which can persuade the sufferer to smile at his own pain. When this youngest brother of ours contemplates with us our dying world and the frustration of all men striving, he is not, like us, dismayed, but quiet. In the presence of such quietness, despair wakens into peace. By his reasonable speech, almost by the mere sound of his voice, our eyes are opened, and our hearts mysteriously filled with exultation, yet often his words are grave. Let his words, not mine, close this story. Great are the stars, and man is of no account to them. But man is a fair spirit, whom a star conceived and a star kills. He is greater than those bright blank companies. For though in them there is incalculable potentiality, in him there is achievement, small but actual. Too soon, seemingly, he comes to his end. But when he is done, he will not be nothing, not as though he had never been. For he is eternally a beauty in the eternal form of things. Man was winged hopefully. He had in him to go further than this short flight, now ending. He proposed even that he should become the flower of all things, and that he should learn to be the all-knowing, the all-admiring. Instead, he is to be destroyed. He is only a fleshling caught in a bushfire. He is very small, very simple, very little capable of insight. His knowledge of the great orb of things is but a fleshling's knowledge. His admiration is a nestling's admiration for the things kindly to his own small nature. He delights only in food and the food announcing call. The music of the spheres passes over him, through him, and is not heard. Yet it has used him, and now it uses his destruction. Great and terrible and very beautiful is the whole, and for man the best is that the whole should use him. But does it really use him? Is the beauty of the whole really enhanced by our agony? And is the whole really beautiful? And what is beauty? Throughout all his existence, man has been striving to hear the music of the spheres, and has seemed to himself once and again to catch some phrase of it, or even a hint of the whole form of it. Yet he can never be sure that he has truly heard it, nor even that there is any such perfect music at all to be heard. Inevitably so, for if it exists, it is not for him in his littleness. But one thing is certain. Man himself, at the very least, is music. A brave thing that makes music also of his vast accompaniment, its matrix of storms and stars. Man himself in his degree is eternally a beauty in the eternal form of things. It is very good to have been man, and so we may go forward together with laughter in our hearts, and peace, thankful for the past and for our own courage. For we shall make after all a fair conclusion to this brief music that is man. The end. And so, Tajigen, we have reached the end of it. Where to even begin? Where to even begin? You see how deep it went at the end right there? Let me have some water. Let me have some water. That's how I should begin. Hydration. After taking a transcendental cosmic journey, let's go back to the grounded things, like hydrating the human-ish body I'm possessing. Especially after 2.5 hours-ish of reading. Well, I forgot how good it hits in these last parts of the book. The epilogue, I guess, technically is part of chapter 16. I didn't realize. It says section 3, like 3 epilogue is what it said. But you can tell the last man that was communicating with the author that was like writing this for him, and it all ended up being mostly rubbish, right? That part is so important. We'll address that later. Actually, let me write that down. Actually. But yeah, he actually there was some time that passed, 20,000 years I think passed for him between the end of the end of chapter 16, let's say, and then the epilogue, which is technically part of chapter 16 in a way. Because as you have seen, right, there are sections, or rather, as I like to call it, sub-chapters within the chapter. If I ever write something, if I ever write fiction of any sort, I am gonna do the same. I'm probably gonna do the same, but they're really gonna be treated more as sub-chapters within the chapters. Something about that structure just goes out to me so much. I love it. I like it. But anyway, it's like music within the music of the spheres. It's like the planets within a solar system, but also a solar system is one of many systems within a galaxy, but also a galaxy is one of many galaxies within a universe. But also a universe is one of many universes within a multiverse, and also a multiverse is one of many multiverses, maybe within an omniverse. Though I don't use that term often. Within existence, within reality. For me, there's no such thing as the multiverse. It's a multiverse, you know. But anyway, kind of digressing a little bit there. I hope I gave it the gravitas it needed. I hope I gave it the emotion I needed. I feel like maybe I should have brought some more emotion to those lines that had an exclamation mark on them, you know? Again, this has all given me over 5 streams of this. How many hours has it been of reading it? We have reached over 10 hours overall. It has been an audiobook worth of it. This has all given me an insight, really deep insight into what it's like being an audiobook narrator and the difficulties of it. I putting aside the more obvious like things that wouldn't go into it, into an audiobook, let's say, that would require re-recording, like, you know, having to repronounce a word, having to reread a line, things like that. I don't think I kept a consistent like voice and cadence throughout it all. Within one stream, or, you know, within all 5 of them, you look at stream number 3, you look at stream number 1, within its first hour, within the 3rd hour of that, and like, it's very different from how I did it today. Of course, I have a non-native English accent as well. That may also, you know, limit what I would do if I were to do an audiobook, but no. I'm just talking about the insight, you know, that it gave me. Oh, man, I don't know how audiobook narrators and readers do it. They're amazing. Like, yeah, acting comes into it and helps you, but keeping the consistency throughout it all, like, man, that's incredible. That's just, yeah. Man, I'm saying the word man. This is making me say that word. Oh, man. There's a lot to talk about, and this reminded me why I love the freaking book so freaking much. Yeah, the early part of the book with the wars, Anglo-French, and like, there's racism, Jews, and Negro thing, this and that, you know, a dark-skinned person, rather. The utopic society is not so utopic. It's like, where's the transcendent cosmic thing you were talking about, Khaiden? Well, we just saw it in these last chapters. And I actually forgot a lot of that was there when the 18th men were being described, and a lot of the racial mind, and a lot of the insights and all that. I know the society was described, the land of the young, all of that, the pylons, the outfits, that, you know, the overalls that makes them fly across the atmosphere of Neptune, all of that. I remember that, but I don't remember the rest of it, especially the thing about, like, I'll talk about some of those other things in a moment that surprised me. And I was like, oh, that's more Star Maker, which we're not reading, and so I'll have to talk about it afterwards. But it wasn't mentioned in the book, but in a way, man, some of that is there. And I'm so glad I got reminded of that. I'm so glad I did. So yeah. Overall, I am so glad we did this. Last and First Man has now fully gone into public domain. In the last places where it needed to become public domain, I think, as of January of this year. So it's a great time to go and pick up the book. Hopefully somebody somehow adapts it in some way. I know one movie was made for mostly this, actually. I need to watch it. Tilda Swinton narrates it. It's very artistic. There's not a sort of movie, it's sort of audiobook, sort of artistic movie. Don't expect to see characters or events depicted exactly. I'm very curious to see what it's like. I haven't seen it. I need to see where the blazes I can find it, because it's hard to find, I think. But and it was like shown in one of those like events that show artistic movies. I forget what they're called, but anyway, it's not like, it wasn't like in cinemas for a period of time or something, I think. But I mean more than that, you know. It's a very difficult thing to adapt, of course, but humanity can be amazingly creative. Truly. At the very least, I can see the First Man part of it up until the extinction, and then the Second Man or so happening, and then communicating with the 18th Man still being part of the narration somewhere, and then ending like this ended, but more in relation to the end of humanity as the First Man before becoming the second ones and things like that. I want to see more depictions, at least, of what each and every humanity looks like, and then the myriad of species and races described in Star Maker, but that's a little bit different. But yeah, Yeah. Let's talk about a few things that I wrote down. Yeah, the land of the young. I ended up headcanoning this thing until I reread this part, that you would think that in that far future it's not just primitive things and stuff like that. Last Man in London, as I mentioned, some things that I thought were in Last Man in London were actually here, but the fellow that narrates this book also like picks a person to like write Last Man in London for him, basically, who kinda is implied to be Olaf Stapledon, kinda not. Kinda, you know? And well, he describes himself, again, this narrator, that he had a period where he was like in a sort of well, a bit of a not aged well description, a description of the early 20th century, but a sort of and one has to think that he's doing it because he's got to use something intelligible to contemporaries, or the mostly rubbish thing, you know, the thing that didn't quite translate well. A sort of red Indian face, he said. Which of course is not the best freaking term, but that's how he used it. And thus it implies, you know, sort of bows and arrows, spears maybe, and doing things like that. The way I read it here, there are countries and nations forming. There are religions forming, there are mythologies forming, they do their Greek pantheon, the Roman pantheons and all that. They do nations, they do like armies facing each other and all that. It's not just like, I'm picturing a Stone Age life, very simple for each and every person involved. They're fighting dinosaurs, but they're also like fighting with spears and flint and stone and things like that. You know why? You know what? The whole thing about heroic myths and all that. Last Man in London elaborated more on that. The heroic heroes, all of that. Something like tokusatsu. Something like anime, something like a series where this epic battle is happening against forces of evil. I think the implication is that, even as entertainment, things like that are kind of beyond the 18th man. But in the land of the young, where they're still adolescent, they're already so much more advanced than a current human, than the most brilliant of current humans. They, even then, they, I think, have a sort of passion for it that they develop in the land of the young. I like to think that they actually took it a bit more beyond just the primitive a lot of the time. They made their own technologies, they created things, and they were basically creating their own freaking animes and living them. Anime and tokusatsu things. Somebody put on a belt and transformed Henshin and was heroics, and they actually stopped doing that. Like, they still admire it to an extent, but they don't need it as much, maybe. But it's like, hey, here's our entertainment and we lived through it. We're living our isekai fantasy, except it's not isekai for them exactly. They do it, and they can die. Some of them do die and they never see adulthood. That's the part of it. They're doing Super Sentais, right? That's the big battle of all Super Sentai versus the Sangyak Empire. Boom, they're recreating that. They're making their own version of it. But at the same time, they're doing something like, oh, it's big Roman armies versus Greek armies or what have you, right? Ancient Egypt with chariots and things like that. Something way more primitive than that, perhaps. Just going back even further. Just to stone tools and I'll smash you with my stone. Things like that. But I don't know. For some reason, I'm headcanoning like that. For those reasons, you know? And they're doing myths with technology or just with their own powers of their mind or whatever. Those myths where they conceive a sort of god or gods or pantheon of gods. They make it so that somehow they have a contact with those gods, even though it's not really them. It's just somebody role-playing as them. Basically, yeah, that's it. That's the term. They're LARPing. They're LARPing. Now, the LARPing that they're doing, because in many extents, even then, that young, I think they're aware that they're not, you know, this is not the end of existence. This is not what existence is all about. And eventually, when I'm an adult, I'll know better. But hey, I'm having fun with this for 1,000 years, right? Their LARPing, though, is not just like the primitive stuff, or sometimes it reaches into medieval territory, right? Sometimes it reaches even beyond that, into sci-fi, into cyberpunk stuff, because why not? But they still have to contend with beasts and all that. You look at an MMORPG, I mean, they're doing an MMORPG in there. Like, you go out into the wild, and this big boar elephant creature is gonna attack you. An owl bear is gonna attack you, and like, it's dangerous out there, right? beyond the confines of cities, and they build cities in the land of the young and all that. I think that's the thing. It's not just all wilderness, though a lot of it is. That's the implication or so, I think. I think it varies, comes and goes. They can do it because they're just so capable of that. Now, going into the next point, I wrote down the big one that I knew I was going to talk about. The group minds, with the 96 subsexes. The super minds, the racial mind. I keep insisting that a lot of this is not a hive mind. Not a mind that... Well, a hive mind usually is like with bees. They are born into it, so it's like... When I say it lessens an individual to join a hive mind, there's no joining. They already are there in the first place, right? You know, it's like a nationality, I guess. Like, if you're born in a nation, you didn't join it exactly. You were born into it, right? As opposed to somebody that does get their citizenship afterwards. But then, you know, when you see like some sci-fi that has humanity become a hive mind or something, or enter a hive mind, it's like the individuals get lessened. Not just sci-fi, but other genres too. Horror, I may have a lot of that. This is not at all like that. That's the whole point. It's not like that. But there were more things akin to it than I remembered. Mainly the fact that the way it was described, the way the group mind was described led into that a little bit, I think. But it was very important. It was made very clear that the individuals still remain individuals. Though, I think what was different a bit than how I remember was that it's only afterwards. During that, yeah, there's a moment in which they're like in a sort of trance, right? That's what made it sound like his hive mind like, but in a hive mind, if you destroy the hive mind, depending on the sci-fi, depending on the setting and all that, the individuals are all gonna die with it, or they're gonna be some lesser organism or moving body afterwards if you disconnect them from the mind or you destroy the hive mind. It's a very permanent situation for them. That's the problem, right? That's the freaking problem. That's the thing. But yeah, things like that. Things like that is what I mean. Hold on, give me a second. But yeah, perhaps there is actually, you know, a Vegito Dragon Ball Fusion situation in which the individuals are kind of gone for the sake of that new heightened mind that could not have been possible without them, but also they had to die into it. But then the difference is that afterwards they're able to return. Well, actually it is like Dragon Ball Fusion in that way, because when you undo the fusion, there's that. And they have a bit of their insight that they had as that mind and all that. The implication to me has always been, and perhaps this is more in Star Maker, and perhaps it was still done here, that the individual mind coexists at the same time as the group mind exists. Like, I am Khaiden, but I'm also the mind with 95 other individuals, let's say. Hey, as Khaiden Tajigen, I mean, I contain multitudes. I am one of those minds. We are one of those minds. Just when I say I, in a way, I'm being inaccurate. In a way, I'm being accurate, but also, you get the point, right? It's such a fundamental part of my VTuber lore, and it's so important. VTuber lore this, VTuber lore that, right? To an extent, I think it's not as important as other content you make, but what we're talking about here figures into that so much. And whenever it can be mentioned, it's definitely worth mentioning. I still need to find better ways to phrase it. Put it in my VTuber wiki somewhere, maybe. Or even my Oshi.co, because, man, I actually got that page, and my Oshi.co kind of has fallen by the wayside in terms of how much it's being talked about, isn't it? Personally, I already have a lot of time, you know, keeping track of a lot of things, both content creation and otherwise, but yeah, that's the reason why I haven't done much there. Haven't even announced that I'm there, and but yeah, you can find me in my Oshi.co. I should actually see if I can find people to collab with and things like that, but anyway. That's the thing about the group minds, the super minds. Common, very common theme with Olaf Stapledon. Star Maker elaborates on that even further, even much further. This brings me to my next point. My next points even. They kept talking about here that they hope in the future some supreme mind, that is a combination of many minds probably, is gonna be able to achieve some supreme where they can when they can eternally, even if temporal natures are there, there's an eternity. They eternally admire. They are all knowing and all admirable somehow, right? Kinda. This does happen in Star Maker. Yes, that mind does happen, and there is among them one human mind fused with all the minds in there. Also, being its own mind and all that, I think. Which is the one human, the one narrator of the book of Star Maker. One has to guess that they couldn't reach into that individual's mind because, as they said, there's other influences. And I think there's that. There's so much to talk about regarding this because there's a lot they mentioned here that I forgot about that surprises me. My third time going through this book. This is my third time going through it. But anyway, that is the supreme moment of the cosmos that does get achieved, which is really cool. To me, you read a synopsis on Wikipedia of Star Maker or something, and that's gonna maybe look like the most noticeable thing. And it is really cool, really amazing, transcends, shows other universes, and I don't mean like a Dragon Ball multiverse or like a Marvel multiverse, no. Something where like the universes are very different, which is a concept that's been seen in sci-fi a lot too, or other things as well, but like incomprehensible, some of them kind of comprehensible, kind of not. Oh, if you know about Flatland, like the thing, I think it was a movie as well, but also other things. I haven't seen the whole thing, but I've seen quite a few clips from it, or I think all of it is available on YouTube. I just kind of have skimmed through it. Seen a lot of it actually, maybe this is 80% of it. But yeah, it's something kind of like that. Some of them were like lesser universes like that. There's a universe with a heaven, an earth, so to speak, and a hell. Very straightforward. The three planes of existence. A musical universe, things like that. And there is a Star Maker. There is a god of sorts. That's also not quite God, but also, yeah, there's a big detachment. The next point I want to talk about, talking about Star Maker that surprised me, is that they actually are aware there's other life outside of the solar system. This solar system, anyway. Even life in other galaxies, the Andromeda Galaxy, being able to see it. Even implying that they can enter the minds there. I thought all this time they could only enter the minds of those that were considered quote-unquote human in the way all 18 humanities here are considered human. In many ways, the Venerians, they were human. The Martians, they were human. Either the word human now no longer means, Homo sapiens or something like that, or we conceive a new word for it. So we mostly go for the former. Human doesn't mean a humanoid figure, I guess, Human can be the Venerian fish like people, the Martians, the philosophical lemurs that were not mentioned here, that get mentioned in Last Man in London. And now it makes sense why they were able to reach into those minds. It's something like a Star Maker. Eventually, a very advanced symbiotic race develops the technology to be able to make people reach into other minds. For them, they themselves are able to do that. That's how the human traveler, the human narrator in the book, becomes a traveler and goes through all of that. They're able to do that. And yeah, the way they enter into other minds, the process is explained there, actually. Like, they need to... It starts off with minds similar enough to your own. Eventually, you're able to expand into even more complex minds with very different bodies and therefore very different, like, life experiences and mindsets, but still very much a human mindset, even though it's also very not human. It's human in the sense of, I am sentient, I am sapient, I experience love, I experience hate, I experience grief, I experience happiness, all of that. And the philosophical thing, the spirit of man, the universe, things like that. But yeah, stuff like that, if that makes sense. Stuff like that. I'm starting to think this background I have behind me, I might start using it permanently for the Satsudan screen. It fits so well because I'm like right behind, like the wormhole, the tunnel right here. I come out of it. This massive head in space. This massive body in space. Oh yes. All right. But like the 18th man had some awareness of that. They just weren't able to really enter other minds that much. They did say something that maybe contradicts a bit of Star Maker. I maybe need to reread it, though it's not doesn't necessarily contradict it in the sense that maybe they just were too ignorant. Even though they discovered all of this, they didn't quite realize how wrong they were in this data. And even then, they would say, "Oh, we were wrong. Okay, we could be wrong. I understand." For example. They say that they might be the most advanced form of intelligence that develops in the Milky Way by that point in time. They're like, if there's gonna be another more advanced one, it's after we're done, after we're dead. And you know, we try to disseminate the seed and all that. I'll talk about that in a moment too. Actually, let me write that down. But no, we would probably have been the most advanced. But a galaxy is a huge freaking space, to the whole point that they have been considered universes before in science. I think it was later on that they were like, no, wait, the universe is not the galaxy. Galaxy is a different thing. Look at Andromeda right there. I think something like that. But a galaxy is so freaking vast in many ways, it can be considered this whole universe. You think travel between solar systems is difficult? Imagine traveling between galaxies. You're not gonna be, what is between galaxies is not even like a bunch of black, like space. No, like it's a very different freaking reality almost. Pretty much. Or at least that's what science says right now in 2026. I don't know. That's what I've understood from it. As much as I love this sort of thing, a lot of like the mathematical based sciences, you might say all sciences are based on that, but the more mathematical ones escape me still. I need to get more into that. There's a lot that I can still understand about that. But yeah, Star Maker, I think they keep talking about the galaxy. Mostly they start talking about, yeah, it takes a while before they start mentioning other galaxies and stuff like that. They go to the other Earth, as it gets called at first. The first time the human narrator goes into the mind of another person from an entirely different world is one in which their noses were on their forehead. They developed their sense of taste way more than any other sense. Music for them was a bunch of different tastes in sequence. Not so much about sound, but they had like MP3 players, like maybe even smartphones that they had their hand in their pocket and all sorts of tastes were transmitted to them, and that was music, basically. That was within this galaxy, I think was the implication. And then the symbiotic race that I talked about, which were composed of ichthyoids and arachnoids. My dear ichthyoids and my dear arachnoids. That became extremely, extremely advanced and enlightened. Escaped the worst of the tragedies that happen across many civilizations across this very galaxy. Like, yeah, there's a lot of interstellar wars, space operas going on, basically, that all are still within the same galaxy, pretty much. Yeah, it's only until they start kind of moving stars towards other galaxies that they realize stars are sentient stars, sentient star clusters. Moi, thank you very much, yours truly. Sentient star systems, yours truly. Things like that, right? But only then, and because they were really trying to reach into other galaxies, not just telepathically, quote unquote, but also physically, for more social intercourse, right? How many times did we see the word intercourse today? Anyway, hopefully we're not interrupted by the ads, because I think we're getting into them, yeah, in about 1 minute and 50 seconds. I'm not gonna roll the ads this time. But yeah, it's all implied to take place with the Milky Way, that symbiotic race, in a sub-galaxy, a subsection of the galaxy or so. This is all Milky Way. But maybe they were talking about Andromeda, where the 18th man here did say, hey, I think there's something of a higher order than ours there in Andromeda or something. But yeah, what is very interesting is that even though they were aware of them and all that, they still couldn't make contact with them. They still couldn't talk to them, which kind of sucks. Or maybe they all were low enough that they had to do a prime directive like in Star Trek. We could make contact telepathically only, but even if we did, it's probably not a good idea. Imagine somebody does that kind of telepathic contact in like a medieval age. They will think it's God speaking to them. Or the devil, or both, you know? When it's not. When it's not. No, that's not who is speaking to you. That is not who it is. Or something like that. Or even further back, it's like, Athena and Zeus and the others are speaking to me. Oh my god. It's Osiris. It's Ra. Things like that, right? And I still find so much fun in mythologies. You know, what is great about reading all these books is that, I get the perspective and I embrace it fully. Not exactly the pessimistic part, but Olaf Stapledon have a preface for that, you know? An essay in myth-making. And this is so important to me, and maybe that thing I said earlier in which maybe the heroics, the tokusatsu, the isekai, the epic battles and all that, there is something beyond that that makes that become a way more simple thing. Very colorless, even. But I still appreciate the hell out of those things, and I still love my mythologies and all that. I still love thinking about Pleiades as like a whole thing with its many mythos and many interpretations and fun things like that. I still want to watch Sailor Moon so badly, where it all becomes so much of that in so many great ways. I played like Hades 2 or something, right? I need to get back to that, but I don't know if I ever will at this rate. I already have spoiled myself with like the endings and all that, but you know, oh yeah, let's talk about Kronos as the god of time, the Titan, Poseidon. Yeah, he looks like that. He talks. He has a human form. He's not human, but he has a human form and superpowers and magic. And yeah, I'm still into that. That's what makes it so great. But yeah, the awareness of the other minds and all that, and even to an extent able to enter other minds. They are not able to enter that many because they're much too different. In Star Maker, they overcome that. Not the 18th Man, but rather the people that have that. They found a way to overcome that, though. You know, it takes trial and error, but it's done in a way that prevents you from dying or something while you try to do that. Basically, it's really well done. It's really well done. But yeah, either the Andromeda Galaxy is actually where that whole thing took place, or they got it wrong here, what the 18th Men were thinking, because that symbiotic race, actually, it all starts for them, their early stages, before they're able to reach high technology and this high enlightenment, let's say, long before humanity is even on Earth, I think, and over billions of years, they just keep doing their thing. Oh yeah, they populate all the planets in their solar system as well. They are able to achieve that, things like that. But yeah. Because, again, where they saw there was something of a higher order seemed to be Andromeda, I think. Or maybe I've already forgotten what I read. But yeah. They also mentioned something very important. As I said, Star Maker introduces things that are part of my lore. Stars are sentient. It's not really understood until much later. It's like what happened with the Martians in this book, but amplified a millionfold at least. They mentioned something very interesting, that the non-planet stars do harbor some life in them, whether it's the life of the many flames that inhabit, many flame-like beings and the burning incandescent stars, or somehow the star itself is alive. In Star Maker, they say that, because the stars are alive. It's just very incomprehensible, but they find out the hard way when they start moving stars in a way to be able to meet with other people. The stars themselves make themselves explode because some illness has taken them, some insanity has taken them, that their bodies are moving away from their beautiful symphony of spheres of eternal cosmic dance that they were doing. Best way you can explain their intelligence as well. But they were intelligent, they felt love and grief and things like that, and well, they exploded themselves and things were bad. Millions, billions, trillions died in tragedy until eventually, after a long time, it was understood. And even longer to make, to be able to communicate, all of that. But yeah. There's I need to read it. I already read the summary and it doesn't sound like something I might like, but there's a thing called The Flames by Olaf Stapledon, and it may have been the last thing he published alive. Anything afterwards is posthumous. So the last thing he published in many ways. It's very late into his life. Like, he passed away in 1950, right? So, what was that, 1947 maybe? Maybe Death into Life was 46, and this is the 47 I was thinking about. But it's called The Flames, and there's like a sentient living flame, came from a planet or something, or some star. And I see the seeds for that being planted, like the flames themselves being alive and all that. Okay, I see where you're going with it. The book itself sounds like it's just, the story just turns out frustrating and kind of depressing. As you might arguably say about a lot of what Stapledon does, but that's not at all what happens here. So I need to give them more of a chance. Odd John to me sounded like it was gonna get very... I don't know if I want to read that. I don't know if that's up my alley exactly. But it turns out it turns out there's more of that I need to get into. So I want to read it. There's communication with the past. Odd John, hopefully it's not a spoiler, oops. Odd John does have communication with some other, like, heightened beings like him in the past, which is fascinating to see. But anyway. But yeah, that's all that. Oh yeah, the seed dissemination thing. Yeah. I always thought the implication was that the Enterprise was sadly not successful. as much as they dedicated their efforts and everything about themselves into it, to the point that they saw themselves decay instead of dying in grace, let's say, it wasn't successful. That may have been what happened, but it's possible that's not the case. Like, it's possible they succeeded, but what came after that, well, it can't go into this book because it would break the narration. It would break the format. There's no explanation for it, right? Unless in the epilogue, some 29th man is like, oh, I'm a member of the 29th man. I cannot communicate anything to you because it will be unintelligible. Yeah, the dissemination worked, and I'm trillions of years after that. I don't know. And thus, yeah, I communicated this to you. I communicated it to the 18th man who communicated this to you. There you go. He's not aware of it. I'm aware of it, but yeah, that's all you get. That's all you get. Bye. No. They probably, I mean, maybe they did achieve something like, 2026 conditions for humanity. They're very different, but they did achieve that somehow. But they wouldn't have any way to communicate that into the past. So if there's 19th man, 20th man, 21st man, it's not known. Or, even if that was achieved, they could not even be called men anymore. There's humans to an extent, yes, but this goes back into the thing I said where I like to think somehow their DNA was injected into each successor, even when artificially created, so that there is ancestry right there, all the way to the first humans. But possibly they did do it here, but it's something that is just very apart from humanity themselves. It's more like you created another life form entirely. It would be like saying Shadow the Hedgehog is the child of General Robotnik, which is not entirely accurate. Not entirely accurate. It's more like it would be like saying Shadow the Hedgehog is human because his creator was human, General Robotnik, and therefore what he creates is going to be a human. Or like saying Mewtwo is human because his creators were human. No. So something like that, right? Though there's full sentience, full intelligence, and all that. It's possible it did succeed, and some of the people seen in Star Maker are based on that. Although the one paragraph that summarizes all of Last and First Man in Star Maker, I think says otherwise. I think it says, nope, it didn't succeed. Or it barely succeeded, like they implied here. Maybe they just sort of became some primitive things that never achieved full sentience, sapience, and eventually died to conditions, and that's it. Not much came of it. This was indeed the last humanity in many ways. But yeah. Oh yeah, and my final note, how they said this is mostly rubbish. So disordered. The word disorder. That's why I keep thinking, this doesn't necessarily imply World War II didn't happen, you know? It can still be fit into the future even afterwards. Not that I want it to be the future necessarily, but like, there's a lot of that got disordered, you know? A lot of metaphors and analogies need to be made. A lot of what was said about the future society of just the first man alone, the island in the Pacific, the world state, some of it is probably inaccurate maybe. There's that. And so there's a lot of this that's true in this future, in these futures, but also a lot of it is inaccurate. And I don't mean just the fact that, oh no, you can't comprehend it anymore. A cat can comprehend literature or finance in London, and thus we need an analogy, right? No, it's like more than just that. It's a whole complete inaccuracy. Like I told you, I sent you the letter written in blue ink, and it comes in red ink, and you can see it was wrong like that. Something like that. See, even in analogies, I'm speaking in analogies like this. I was thinking of the Jim Carrey thing in Liar Liar. This pen is blue, and it was, or the other way around, I can't remember. Oh, that was so good. That was so good. Masterclass in acting, I would think. So freaking good. And thus, hopefully I've given you some nice idea as to why I love this book so much and why it's been so freaking important to me, Tajigen. Wow. Here we are though. Here we are at the end of it. Yeah, I might then change the background to actually make that be the permanent one. We could return to the previous one. Here it is. Actually, I'm thinking I'm gonna return to this one yet again. Let's keep using it for the next week of streams or so. Yes, let's talk about this next week. Well, a few more words to say about Last and First Man though. I hope you liked it. I hope you liked my reading of it somehow. You can always just find it for free. I mean, there's gonna be paid versions and all that, especially the audiobook. More professionally read and all that, but you can read it yourself. Find it for free somewhere. Just look for it online. EPUB, PDF, things like that. Whatever suits you best. If you want a physical version, then yeah, you probably have to pay for it. I should get a physical version one day. Never getting it physically. Neither Star Maker. I should do that someday. At the very least for Star Maker. But anyway, this next week of streams. So it's gonna be all very different. The usual suspects are not there, not exactly. FF14, not on Friday because we're doing a Kamen Rider karaoke stream on Friday because it's the anniversary. At least by that time, I think in Japan it will no longer be the anniversary, but still it counts. Because it's gonna be at a very different time as well. It's not gonna be like at the start time we had today, which is also the start time on Friday. And Saturdays as well, though I'll talk about that in a moment also. Also with what happened yesterday. Again, sorry about that cancellation. But we'll start later, something like around the afternoon, evening-ish, 5 to 7 p.m.-ish. Somewhere there is the start of the stream. And that's Central Time or Eastern Time, one of those two, both of them kind of. So stay tuned for the full schedule for that. I want to publish it as soon as possible though, because there's a stream on Thursday as well. But before I talk about that one, Sunday also is going to have a karaoke dedicated only to Super Sentai music. Mostly it's going to be openings, a few endings. But I doubt there's going to be even one insert song. Maybe one that I want to try singing, but also it's a bit beyond my voice. We'll see. Oh, and as for how long each of those karaoke streams is going to be, I don't know. I don't expect they'll reach in something into like 4 hours, right? But I am hoping to do like 2 hours of singing. Well, we're yapping in between BRB screens maybe. Well, maybe just one. 3 minutes of ads to happen, right? That's important. The start of the screen and all that. But yeah, there's going to be 2 karaoke streams. Almost in a row. Thursday of this coming week. The funny thing is, Thursday streams end up being at that time later, in which these streams are going to be now, which is not the usual time. So the other way around it happens. Thursday is going to be at the earlier time or so because that's the best availability for Alluring on Thursday because we're going to do a collab, or at least that's what we're planning to do, for the Hatching Tide event in FF14. So stay tuned for that. Stay tuned for that being fully in the schedule. He'll probably put it in his schedule as well. Unless there's a change of plans and all that, but I think this is it. Yeah. I think we're going for, we're shooting for 12 p.m. Eastern. Around this time. A little bit earlier than this. Right now it's 2 p.m. 2:15, depending on your clock. Eastern time. All of that. But yeah, like around then. Noon Eastern, right? Or Central. I just keep hovering between 2 time zones because I'm multidimensional like that. Actually more than 2, but those 2 are close enough that I keep thinking of them as siblings. Sibling time zones almost. But anyway, yeah. 11 a.m. Central Time if I'm not mistaken, right? It's gonna be for that. Yeah. So a little bit later than the usual time because it's been 11 a.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Central start time for everything here. So yeah. Stay tuned for that. That's how the week of stream starts. Saturday, I don't think we're gonna have a stream. I really do owe you, now more than ever, a Legend ZA Mega Dimension stream, preferably a long one, because we couldn't do it yesterday, sadly. But I don't think it's still, I mean, it would have been in the plans maybe either way on Saturday, but I don't think it's happening anymore. I kind of wanted to do another karaoke stream for Metal Heroes, but I don't know enough Metal Heroes songs. And well, even if I did, I only know really to sing in a karaoke stream well enough, because karaoke is casual, it's not like a formal concert either. So I kind of try to make it be that way at times, but also I allow myself room to like, oh wait, let me restart the song, for example. Yeah, so even with all that, I only really know the Space Sheriff songs, the 3 of them, the openings. That's it. I want to learn the others, I'll listen to them more, maybe next year we'll have more. But yeah. And even though Super Sentai's over, we are gonna have a karaoke for it. Yes. Maybe I'll sneak in Project Red in the form of Space Sheriff stuff, even though it's not Gavan Infinity. Haven't learned, like, the ending song. Because it doesn't have an opening, it has an ending, apparently. Only an ending. Anyway. And at some point I should learn Ultraman, right? It would be great to do that as well. Its anniversary is far away from that. I mean, it's the same for Metal Heroes, to be fair. But yeah. It's funny how the writer and Sentai anniversaries are so close to each other. They really are siblings in so many ways. But anyway. Probably no stream Saturday. I could use the resting time in between the streams and also the extra time to do some other things, because usually there's some work I would do on Sunday that I'm about to get into, hopefully, after the stream. But because the stream is going to be at a later time, it would be better for me to do some of that work on Saturday. You know, getting ready for the week and all that. And yeah, especially that Saturday. Some things begin as the month begins that I need to put together. So yeah. That is all for this stream, Tajigen. And that is all completely, overall, for the last and first man reading by Olaf Stapledon. I know this was very different from my usual streams. Oh yeah, after this coming week, what is gonna happen on Sundays? Well, it can be anything again. We shall see what it is. What is still gonna happen is that the Sunday streams will be a shorter affair than what we do on Friday or Saturdays. Just like the Thursday streams are a different affair. There's some other potential experiments with different kinds of streams that I want to do on Sundays that are still pending. You know, what is still pending is that I owed you all, mostly from Alluring and the Sabaton, a Wuthering Wave stream. It's taken months, but yeah. I mean, that's only if I can even run it, because first of all, I need over 100 gigabytes of space. I don't have it. I don't know how I'm going to free it up right now. Second, I need to see if the PC can take it while streaming. Something tells me it can't. It's actually very demanding. So it would require some tests, and if they're not successful, then I don't know. Like, at least being able to be on YouTube while I'm doing it. But the reading streams, you know, these last and first man streams actually started because of incentives being made in the subathon back in November. It's already becoming more distant. Almost 6 months now. Or has it already been 6 months? I don't think so. It's more like 5, right? Anyway. Yeah, it's been great. These have been nice to do. But I am ready to move on to other things. I'm never moving on from Last and First Man, though. It's still always something that's in my mind. Especially that last freaking part of the book, man. It just blows you away with... It's not just the scale that grows. It's like... how deeper it gets. How deeper it gets about other things. Like, you're just seeing like a sort of dystopic/utopic future situation that you've seen in maybe many other sci-fi or something. More political, more about politics and things like that. Geopolitics, maybe. But then, it goes way beyond that. And then it goes way beyond that beyond. That's what makes it so freaking good. So I hope you love the book as much as I love it. Yes, there are some parts that are like, yeah, these parts are not that much to my liking exactly. But anyway, on that note, we end it. Remembering the words of the last man ever. Like the last of the last man. Remembering them right there. Arigato minna. Thanks for joining me on this great journey. It should all be there in a playlist. 5 streams of it. Thank you so much. お疲れ様でした。